And we're off that weekend, so I said, okay, we'll go up to the cottage, and then Christy called me. She said, I said, yeah, we are. She's super coming. So the pickleball last week. It's so much fun. It is the only thing is we laughed because I thought, we turned 60 and we're both like, yeah, we have to learn pickleball now. So we turned 60, it's all we can do. But it's not like a game when you're playing pickleball. It's like, it's a serious activity. I didn't even think it would matter at all. Oh, you did.
I was like looking, I'm like, I don't have any money, but I want to see.
You know, the right thing to do is I'm indoor. It's one of the things I was. It's one of the things I was excited about. You know, tennis. Court.
You got a second?
And now it's like a bunch of things.
Okay. Well, I think she booked the insurance, the travel insurance. And it's prepared to pay the difference. I think that's the easiest way she can do
They knew
it.
you were coming.
Rather than cancel it and try to redo it.
Yeah, for us, we don't have to pay. Like,
No. I think the only difference is like $35 or something. She just got to go to catch you. And pay that. Yeah.
Yeah, but if I drink enough,
No.
he's in Arizona, right? He's at a research conference.
Alice is good.
Actually, some of the supply educational
Probably
research.
touch base tomorrow. Just
Talk about medical studies and they want to make
some of the stuff.
practitioners come in and give reality. So he should come back.
The markets. All right.
Well, he did. He's still in Phoenix. It's not bad. Education research.
Okay.
No.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Can I give you a hug?
How you doing?
I've been good. How are you?
Really good.
Good. I have to catch up again.
Yeah.
That's why the range is to make it
I don't know if I need you.
I don't like it.
Oh, yeah.
Fill out something, right?
No, I probably go right at the table.
Is that the last bag?
I don't even know if that's like a family photo type thing.
I was gonna say,
Oh, is there some more?
I don't know what I want.
An endless supply. No, we need to buy a break right now.
No, you're good. Unless you want to.
I'll let you know if my mind changes.
Fight the urge to come help.
I don't need it.
I know, it's a super easy. It is, and like I said, these sites. But it's kind of a neat setup. We haven't got it. So, I don't think I'll do
No, she's good. He's a soldier.
He's
Yeah.
fine and working. He's recovering.
He's a soldier.
It's good to see you, Mark.
It's taking longer than I thought it would, but I think I'm in the.
Welcome, everybody, to the February 6, 2024 Board of Education workshop. We have all of our trustees present. Dr. Macheski is at a research conference and filling in. We have Mr. West. We begin these meetings with public communication, and we have two people from Athens who'd like to come speak to us. Come on up, guys. Have a seat there. Sam Steiner.
Wait, you said sit?
Yes.
Oh,
Wait, not there.
all right.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Sam Steiner.
I'm Madison Blue.
We're both seniors at Athens High School and also both the vice president of Athens Student Council.
And we're here to invite you to our 2024 Athens Charity Week. The charity we selected for this year is called Love for a Child. They basically help children, youth, and families within Michigan's foster care system, and they are using this money to help facilitate overnight camps and provide mentorship opportunities for these children, and they continue to provide resources for the families. So it's a very big thing for us to help these kids as much as possible.
Yeah, so basically our charity week officially starts next week, but this whole week right now, we are starting up. So this whole week we have restaurant night, so if you want to go to Firebird Tavern after this, we are hosting restaurant night. So from the proceeds, we'll go back to the charity that we selected. This Friday we have a euchre tournament, so you can sign up through that. It's $25 to participate, 10 to just watch. We also have a silent auction that is open to the community. That following Saturday we have a new event, which is Community Quest.
Yep, the Community Quest is actually really cool. There's 8 different destinations involved and 10 plus puzzles or games. And basically, you start with the first puzzle and you have to navigate your way through the destinations. And it's also clue themed, so you're trying to see who killed who with what, where. So it's a really cool thing.
It's a very new event. We tried it back in 2017, so we're bringing it back. That following Saturday, we still have ice skating at the Buffalo Wild Wing Arena, so that's also open to the community. Then, starting in the charity week, we have many events at night, so like Espresso Yourself, it's like a coffee house where everybody from the community is open to.
Singing, poetry, music, musicians.
One of our big nights is Wednesday night this year, so that would be Parent Kickoff and Mr. Athens. So if you guys
want to
show
code
your
for
kids,
us, please come.
please, we very much appreciate that. So that sign up link is in our Instagram, so Athens Student Council. And then also Mr. Athens is after following that. So feel free to
After
follow.
what?
Mr. Athens is following that Parent
On
Kickoff.
Oh,
Wednesday.
after.
So if you want to come get a snack before and then watch Mr. Athens and see those participants.
Yep. And that's basically sums up some of our main events. We'd really love to see all of your faces there. Having community participation is very important to us, and it helps bring everyone together. So, yes.
Do you have all this stuff you talked about? Is that on the website, on the Athens website?
Yes.
Or the schedule?
We also do have a link tree in our Instagram
Yeah,
bio, correct?
a lot of
With
it's
all
posted
the-
in our
Yep.
Athens City Council. I know like the Athens Booster posted on Facebook, the PTO, on there.
Frame.
We can also, if you want to have any questions, you can either email us or Ms.
Ms.
Henry
Henry.
or Mr. Dufresne.
Would you
Would you
have Ms.
mind?
Henry email the school board, the
Yeah, we'll
calendar,
have it,
and then that way
yes.
we can get that.
Yes, we do have the full schedule.
And we
Yes.
still have restaurant nights too.
Yes.
I can forward that. quickly.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for coming. Thanks for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Start with teaching and learning. We have 3 things under teaching and learning tonight. We've got an accountability plan update, looking at red code and restorative practices. Then we have an equity team update and a course description book. For each of these, we were talking that probably the best thing to do is let's go through the deck, and then we'll hold the questions to the end, and then we'll tackle all the questions after each presentation. That seem like a plan? Okay. Hi.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Deputy West and Mr. Schmidt, thanks for having us this evening. We're fortunate to be joined by Mrs. Thomason and Mrs. CMC to talk about our first Red Pillar update and lean into some learning around restorative practices. So as a community of learners here in Troy, as well as our larger parent community, we've had quite a few questions that have come about restorative practices. What are they? What might they look like? And so I'm going to turn it over to the two women in our organization who have the highest level of training that we have in Troy, and let them share with you some of their knowledge.
Thank you. So the first thing we want to start with is talking about learning intentions and outcomes, what we hope to gain from sharing this information with you all tonight. And so we definitely want to just gain, and hopefully everyone gains a deeper knowledge of what restorative practices look like and those principles. Learning the ways in which it shows up in our schools, communities, and why it's important. Discovering ways in which it's implemented and how it will impact social change for our students as well as our educators and our community at large. And then by the end, we hope that the examples that we provide in the communications and the learning will lead to better ways that you might be able to explain the restorative practices model in this short time, engage in some reflective thinking about personal experiences of staff, students, and community members, and their lived experiences as we talk through what restorative practices entails and how that impacts them, and then applying, again, those principles of restorative practices. So we've already been introduced.
I'm Casey Connaughton. I'm the assistant principal at Smith Middle School. And my training in restorative practices started in 2012. I was my first year as an administrator and received training through the Macomb County ISD, which that training at that time was provided to us through the Resolution Center of Macomb. And then last summer, I was able to, through the Troy School District, receive the trainer of the Train the Trainer training with Phil Boyle. And he is a trainer through the International Institute for Restorative Practices, and so I had that second level of training with him.
I am Chantel Gansey, the supervisor for education, equity, inclusion, and community relations. And my training goes back to 2010 with the Marygrove College Social Justice Program, more so based in restorative justice, so looking at how restorative practices grew from the concept of thinking about how restorative justice shows up in our society. And then I was able to collaborate with some of our administrators and educators in Rochester Community Schools and engage in some refresher foundation practices as it relates to restorative work.
In 2018, Michigan law had changed for school districts if you're going to suspend or expel a student, 7 factors to consider. And so what that law really did is force schools to pause and really think about the student and think about these pieces. And so student age, disciplinary history of the student, if the student has a disability, and does that impact what steps need to take place next. The seriousness of the behavior, is there a safety risk with the actions that have happened? And the use of restorative practices. Has there been a use of restorative work prior to a suspension or expulsion in the past, and if not, would that be a place to use it? And then the level of intervention was something, just looking at all of our options that we would have at our disposal prior to a suspension or an expulsion. And so that law in itself really changed the way administrators handled school discipline. In the past, it might have been we had a code of conduct, and you did this, and then this will happen. It was very simple, and that was actually my first experience as an administrator, as a high school assistant principal, with a little overlap with the person I was leading, who had been the assistant principal there for a very long time. He had put his 30 years in, and he was ready to go, and I said, well, what do I do? And he just handed me the code of conduct and said, just read it. And that was, at that time, my training and my understanding. And it was a pretty rough start getting into it that way. And so I was so incredibly thankful then for this training in 2012.
been really helped me facilitate some more support tools to emotional discipline.
So what we like to do is just, it's a quick 2-minute video. I think it's really important. It comes from the IIRP, so it'll explain a little bit more about who they are. But it's important because all of the training that we talk about, even Rochester Community Schools, the foundations, and restorative practices, that is deeply rooted in the services that the IIRP provides. And so we want to go ahead and just show this. And it's also important to note that this is something that Open Schools utilizes for restorative practices learning. So it's something that is happening across a lot of districts.
Our world is changing at a breathtaking pace. Social patterns that have long characterized human life are changing dramatically around the globe, diminishing social bonds within families, schools, workplaces, and communities. But humans are hardwired to connect. Just as we need food, shelter, and clothing, we also need strong and meaningful relationships to thrive. With all this in mind, what is restorative practices? Restorative practices is an emerging social science that studies how to strengthen relationships between individuals and within communities. When put into practice, the effects are profound. In schools, students experience greater safety and sense of belonging, resulting in improved behavior, less bullying, and less violence. In workplaces, leaders facilitate direct communication among staff and address conflict as it arises. The result is higher performance, greater accountability, and effective collaboration. In criminal justice, new options allow victims and offenders, friends and family, to repair the emotional harm caused by crime. Throughout our neighborhoods, restorative practices give regular people more voice in the issues that matter most. In a nutshell, restorative practices is the science of relationships and community. Your individual daily interactions have a big impact on the world around you, at your job, with young people, and throughout your community. How we relate matters. This video was brought to you by the International Institute for Restorative Practices. To learn more, attend our flagship event. Our world.
And so with that just brief overview of what restorative practices is, we want to talk a little bit more about the framework and what goes along with those practices.
So the basis for restorative work is this idea of the 3 E's: engagement, explanation, and expectation clarity. And really this is just getting back to clear communication and how we want to be treated as humans. And so when there's something that's going on and we need to have some deeper conversation about something that may have happened or a concern that we have, we need to be engaging with the individual. And so part of the framework is providing learning and strategies and ways to engage. So how a teacher can engage with a student, or how we can help facilitate 2 students engaging with one another to share their concerns, get into that problem solving using some of those executive functioning skills, and just overall game planning on what we're going to do to move ourselves forward. And then explaining. I work with middle schoolers predominantly, and so a really good explanation is incredibly important. Explaining the why, what we're talking about, so they really understand, and also understanding their impact. And so if we're talking about something that happened in a classroom, a conflict between 2 students, middle schoolers also have a hard time at times seeing outside of themselves. And so really talking through that explanation of how their actions have impacted not only the person directly in front of them, but maybe even the larger, the trickle effect of that. And so really getting into explaining why we're here, and that expectation of clarity. And then moving on, being very clear with that, the end outcome of, we know why we're here, we know what happened, and now we need to have a plan to move forward and what that expectation is. If there's ever a gray area, we won't have a positive outcome. So really being clear about those expectations at the very end, and really focusing on those 3 C's whenever we're working with students. And this also applies with adult relationships as well, as you're talking spouse, sibling, parent, coworker. These 3 E's can also fall into any of those categories for really productive conversations.
so thinking more about the working with and not to brings us to the social discipline window, which is a huge part, a very important part of the restorative practices framework. And so here, it's important to note that the best approach that we always want to take is the approach that's restorative, where we have an opportunity to create that balance of accountability and providing some support to our students. When we talk about the punitive piece, that's the two. And a lot of times when we're operating in that space, we're not allowing the opportunities for learning and for growth. We're just going ahead, we're giving the discipline, and we're just letting it be without an opportunity to learn, to reflect, to think about how we can create greater change. And then we're thinking about the neglectful approach of the social discipline window. This is the point when we think that the students are not in the space, or adults are not in the space to be able to be restorative, to be able to reflect and to learn, to think about if they are causing harm or if they have been harmed, what it looks like to allow for community to be rebuilt after you've had an experience like that. And so it's really thinking about how do we might be creating some missed opportunities when we're operating in that window of social discipline. When we are more permissive, again, it's this space of more missed opportunities, and then we're keeping students, again, from learning about their consequences, the consequences of their actions, how we can move beyond those, and then leaning more into that belief, again, that they cannot really take an accountability for those things. And so when we wrap it all up, we go back to doing with. We want to have that balance of both support and accountability, and it creates the belief that mistakes and conflict are part of their environment and they're going to happen, but we can definitely move past them with some growth, with some change, and some knowledge and reflection.
And so what the International Institute for Restorative Practices will tell us in our learning is that 80% of the work is all proactive. And a lot of that work our teachers and our staff are already doing, and sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. So it's all that work that they're doing to develop relationships with students, to put structures in place to support students, to provide learning when harm is caused, when harm has been done. And then the 20% is that responsive part. So it's the reaction. After the incident has happened, what do we do after? So it's so much more than just that. It's a small portion. We really, the training that is most often provided really covers most of that proactive piece, that 80% part. That's really where we're spending a lot of our time doing this learning around that framework. And then it gets into that reactive piece. And at the bottom there, it just has that continuum of the very specific and explicit pieces that a restorative practice training would go through for anybody that participated, talking about effective statements and how you speak to students when you see something amazing or when you see something that's concerning. I really loved seeing you participate in our conversation today. That made me so proud of the work that you've done over the last few weeks. I can't wait to see what you do moving forward. It's an example of a proactive, positive, effective statement. But I can also bring attention and notice behavior that I have concerns about. When you interrupt your peers in class when they're trying to share, it makes me feel frustrated that they can't have their voice in the classroom. In the future, I want you to really think about pausing and listening to your classmates when we're in a circle and having a conversation. And so that just, again, it's clear, it explains what has happened, and in the future, that expectation moving forward is clearly stated. And then effective questions. This is something we see and we use a ton in schools of what happened. And the question is what happened, it's not why did you do that? Because the why did you do that actually assumes that like you're making a conscious decision to do something wrong. And so describing the event that took place and then getting into how did you feel when that happened. And so there's really some strategically developed questions that we go through in conflict to really get to then that part at the end where we can make some commitments to move forward. And those questions can be used in these small impromptu conversations, and that's where I'm in the hallway and I see some body language that I might not love, and I want to just say like, hey, can you guys tell me what's going on here? And that can start, and then I can use effective questions or I can use effective statements. Community circles in our classrooms, those can be used when we're introducing a new concept or an idea. It can be used in an academic setting. But it also can be used to restore conflict that has happened, to talk about a topic that might bring up some emotion, and how are we going to facilitate that conversation in a way that's safe, where people feel comfortable to bring their voices out. Or there's something that's going on in the world around us and we want to have a structured and safe way to do that. So learning how to facilitate those circle conversations. And then that formal conference, that is where we really get into that space of that reactive, responsive, restorative justice piece. That might be a reentry meeting with two families, two students that got into a fight at school. And we want those students to feel safe and comfortable coming back, and those families want to be part of the conversation. And so we bring them all in and we facilitate a very formal conversation, so everyone feels comfortable moving forward.
And so just going back to the why, research shows, and it's important to know, again, that when we really embed restorative practices, we are addressing the disparities of how suspension shows up, how expulsion shows up, what other steps could we have taken. Sometimes it's the SAN approach, we have to take those steps, but there are also times where we can look at things and think about how do we bring restorative practices into this opportunity in order to engage these students and move them along without isolating or removing them from the community. And then the next part is addressing the conflict. So Casey was just speaking to that, Mrs. Connors was just speaking to that, the harm and addressing that this goes beyond just two individuals. So she's talking more about the formal conferences, bringing in the families, that thinking about what support looks like in the classroom, in the community, as well as at home, in order to make sure that while we're going through this process and this journey, making them feel safe, welcoming them back, whether they have been harmed or caused the harm, we're all involved in this. And then again, that restorative justice component that spoke to it. So thinking about like wrongful actions and harmful actions, so that accountability piece is where restorative justice lives in this work.
We just kind of gave you an overview of like that framework, right? So if you were going to day one of restorative practice training, you've got like just a very condensed little version of that right there. But we're in a school setting, and so we wanted to really spend some time talking with you all about how that applies to student discipline.
So this is pulled directly from our student code of conduct. And the line is highlighted here, which is very, very important. All of this is important, but restorative practices developed in response to the code of conduct violation may include, but are not limited to these things. So it just goes through the processes that we have listed as Troy School District to think about how restorative discipline and practices show up for our students and for our community when we think about ways to implement it and apply it. And so some of those things we see here might show up in community service activities, or alternatives to suspensions. Maybe it's in-school suspensions or detentions. There are a lot of reflections, book studies, learning opportunities that are applied. And then also just engaging in more agency and community support. So for example, when I've had one-on-one conversations with students, I always ask, okay, where do we go here? So now that you've done this learning, you've had some time to reflect, how do you feel that you're going to be an agent for change? And a lot of times they will already have their answers, right? They may have written a reflection response, and then they'll say, I'm also committed to doing this. And I'll say, I'm gonna hold you to that. And we have some follow-up and some dialogue. And so it's definitely a wonderful process to watch when you can see the students take that agency and really lean into the learning and apply it.
So I surveyed our secondary administrators, and one of the questions I had asked was, where do you see, can you give me some examples where you see restorative practices in your buildings and in your spaces? So I just pulled these directly from that survey. And so we've had this great opportunity this year to utilize the Michigan Cares Navigate 360 curriculum, which provides a plethora of modules and learning opportunities to talk about behavior. And our students know when they did something wrong. Like we can open up the code of conduct and we say, you did this right here, and they said, yes, I did. But what 360 has offered to us is this opportunity to learn more. And it's not learning about the behavior that they did, but sometimes it's learning, because as you're talking with the student, like, I'll just use an example. Recently, a student had said something to another student. It was incredibly unkind. Well, why did you say that? Like, what were you thinking when that happened? And he's like, I just was so angry. And sometimes when I get so angry, I just say whatever I want. I don't really understand why I do that. Sometimes my mom says I do that too much. Okay, so then that opens up a conversation then also with the parent, but we can also tailor our learning, not around saying unkind things, but understanding our emotions and recognizing when we feel those emotions, so we can develop some better tools to self-regulate ourselves. And so that's a restorative action. That's a restorative practice. We're providing, even though it's a response to a behavior that's in that reactive continuum I was showing you, but we're providing learning opportunities for students to minimize the opportunity for that behavior to happen again. And so you'll see that listed in here from our administrators. A lot of student-to-student conversations, using those reflective questions with students, really trying to support teachers on the use of circles in their classroom to help build community. So students also feel connected to their teacher and then also to their classrooms themselves. So that way, that also minimizes the opportunity for unwanted behavior to take place. Lots of reflective thinking and questions, and again, those re-entry meetings. Assistant principals and principals work a lot with student discipline, and so we are on that end of the continuum where we do probably work more in the reactive space, but not having restorative work with just leading us into that punitive window that Chantel was talking about also. So again, I wanted to make sure that you guys had seen this and you could see some of these examples that are currently here in Troy.
And so when we think more so about how do we define restore, what might they look like? I think we've given some examples of how that shows up. But it's just, it goes back to that accountability, that validation, that reflection, those components. Repairing relationships and ensuring that the community remains intact, right? So we're talking about restoring, we're talking about keeping the community intact, thinking about the ways that students don't have to be removed, isolated from their environments when they come back. They have a sense of home, belonging, safety. They have learned, they're ready to be agents for change, hopefully. And then we are all working towards this as a community. Another piece when we think about adults and reacting to this. And so it's leaning more so into the approach and seeking understanding for the process in general, and definitely honoring the humanity, talking about that. So honoring who we are as humans and recognizing that, again, conflict and mistakes are inevitable. But what happens when they show up in our school communities, and how do we respond to that? And recognize that as humans, we need to be cognizant that that means that we should take into account how everybody is playing their part into this, and how do we really move forward to make sure that when it's all said and done, that we are still establishing that greater sense of community, and we are supporting, and we are also making sure that there's some level of accountability depending on where this falls.
And one thing I would say about adults reacting differently, I hear more often if I am suspending a student and I'm sending a student home, I hear more often from parents when I say, Joey's going home, but we're gonna do a re-entry meeting. Mom and Dad, I want you to come and meet with us, and we're gonna talk about what had happened. And we're also gonna give Joey an opportunity to sit down with that student. We want you to be part of the prep for that. So I'm gonna call you tomorrow. Here are the questions that I want us to talk through, and so that way you guys can talk about it at home, and then we're gonna work on that. Their parents are always appreciative of that, because, and again, I'm working with middle schoolers, so I also have the burden of sometimes being the first person to tell a parent the child did something really wrong. And so providing parents with this opportunity for their own learning too, and how to talk to their child about what happened, and getting a deeper understanding of what's going on with their child is also incredibly valuable. And if we're always framing it in this mindset of we're also trying to protect your child for when they return, because we want your child to feel safe when they come back. We don't want anybody to say anything to your child that they're not prepared for, we haven't talked about, and here's what we're going to do. And so those conversations, they typically go really well and are really appreciated. I love this graphic. It's been around for a little while. So a traditional discipline versus a more restorative one. And I put a couple examples on the left. Because we're not going to name student names here, but we have student A caught vaping. But these are things that have happened in my personal experience. And so trying to put these into two different types of categories. We have a student that was caught vaping in a bathroom. If we just stuck with my first assistant principal job when that guy handed me the code of conduct and said, here, just do what this says, it would have just been, okay, you're suspended and you're going to be home for 3 days and see you when you come back. And I wouldn't have scheduled a return meeting. They just would have came to school, and I wouldn't have met with them, and I wouldn't have talked about, I wouldn't have used our school liaison officer as a resource or reached out to our youth assistance program at that time. I wouldn't have done any of those things, and it just would have been, you're suspended and come back a couple of days later. In a more restorative approach, we might say, you're going to be out of school because we do not allow illegal substances on our school property. And so you are going to have some time out of school. But we're also going to work with Troy Youth Assistance, and I'm going to contact our liaison through there. And I would like you to set up a meeting with them. And if you do that meeting, then your suspension may be reduced, and we can come back and we can talk about moving forward what we're going to do differently. And parents, 99% of the time, they take up that TYA, and that's an amazing resources for our families, and they don't even know half the things that they have until they actually go to that, and then they receive that information. And so that would be a more restorative. We're having that high response for that behavior, but we're also elevating the support, so we're in that restorative quadrant that Chantel talked about earlier. And then my second example, we've got a fist fight that happens at school. Two boys are like jawing at each other in the hallway. It gets to be too much, and we've got some pushing and some punching that ends up happening. Traditional response, here it is in the code of conduct. It's a level 2 violation. We don't fight at school. We don't cause harm to other individuals. You're removed. You're suspended. We'll see you in 2 days. We don't bring anybody together. We don't do any of those things. But if we have that and we want a restorative approach, we will remove the students. We will spend individual time with those students. We will use those effective questions to really get to the understanding. I swear, 99% of the time there's just a miscommunication somewhere, a misinterpreted look, a misinterpreted text or phone call, a video game conversation, who knows? But it escalated into such a place where we had harm that actually was caused, which we can't have. And then there's people around all watching, and then everyone's talking about it. A suspension serves a place of also restoring the larger community who saw an act of violence that took place. So it's important to remove those students from school. But we want to bring them back to a place where they feel safe to come to, and they're not going to meet each other in the hallway for the first time after a fight and just stare at each other like, I don't know what to do next. We want to make sure they've had that conversation before that happens so they feel comfortable. And then the people that saw this took place, they see them interact in a positive way, and they know their community has been restored. And so that's why we put those pieces in place.
So we just wanted to take some time to go through a few misconceptions as it relates to restorative practices, but also providing some realities to how those misconceptions really show up in our work. So the first misconception is that restorative practices does not hold students in individuals accountable. And we've already heard, through a few of the slides already, that there is a need to hold students accountable. It provides a structure for students to take that ownership and to hear about the harm they cause, but also for that repair to happen, and then for there to be some type of opportunity for the student who has experienced the harm to feel like that they have been seen, heard, and validated through the experience as well.
Teachers should only focus on academics and not its SEL needs. And we've been talking about relationship building for decades in school and the importance of that. And the emotional learning that our students need to have is incredibly important. And a lot of our teachers are already doing this work. Like they're doing it and they're not knowing they're doing restorative work. Anytime they're doing a team building activity in the beginning of class, anytime they ask their students, let's go around and let's talk about one positive thing from the weekend. If they do a check in, check out with all of their students, thumbs up in the middle, thumbs down, how was your day? They're getting a pulse for how their students are doing. And that's all restorative work. It's helping build that community. And so, yes, that is a misconception. It is a must that we need to continue supporting our teachers and learning how to do that.
Another misconception is that it's a one and done approach, and that's absolutely not true. It's a system of approaches, and it goes back to really wanting to build and then strengthen that community, and then thinking through and continually cultivating the why. Why are we doing this? Why is it important to have a restorative practices process in our school systems?
Restorative practices replaces or removes other disciplinary measures, especially with extreme behavior. We just talked about that. You have to suspend students sometimes behavior, and that's why we have a code of conduct. There's just things that cannot be acceptable to take place in a school setting because they're harmful to that student or harmful to another or harmful to the community as a whole. And so we need an opportunity to restore that balance back into those relationships and into the community. But we cannot just suspend, and that's the point. And so restorative work has to be there with this potential.
And then finally, belonging is not essential to restorative practices, when indeed it's actually a very foundational piece of restorative practices. We go back to thinking about that communal approach and wanting to have that embedded, and then making sure that school is a home away from home, and so when they return at any given instance, that they feel that, and they feel safe, and they feel seen and validated, held accountable, supported, and that we can move forward and all be change agents and work together. And so this is where we are now. And so where we are now as One Troy is that we are definitely living into a few of these already, but we definitely have to do more work at shifting and growing our understanding around the concept of restorative practices, that how it shows up, capacity building. So continuing to provide trainings and professional development for all staff, continuing again to cultivate that environment with applying these practices with our students and staff and providing support. And then engagement, when we think about that piece, is gathering feedback and measuring outcomes and having that connection with our community by way of our families. So bringing them into that process when we talk about formal conferences, or thinking about, okay, well, if we're taking this approach where we're not really seeing the outcomes that we want to see, maybe we can all come together and think about what might be best in order to grow and move into a better restorative concept and culture. And then 5 is the continuity. So not just having a training at the beginning of the year and not having another one, but a refresher, coming back to it, consistently building up the capacity of what the trainers look like. Who are the experts in the space? Maybe we have someone in every building who can speak to this and can lean into it and be supports across our district. Reimagining goes back to measuring those outcomes. Maybe do we need to reimagine what our restorative concept or culture looks like? And then re-engaging. Anytime we have the opportunity to re-engage staff, students, and families in the process, to think about are we taking all of the best approaches to support our students through this restorative culture? We need to do that.
Right, we gave you a lot.
Is part of the restorative justice training for adults, it seemed like a big piece of that would be de-escalation. And maybe because of just experiences that I've had over time, sometimes there are people adults who are so
I would not say that it's part of the specific training. There's not a de-escalation component to that typical, like, first, your basic training of restorative practices. It really is like really digging into the way the brain works. There's a lot of science behind understanding why humans act the way they do, what our response to shame is, what are all the affects that we have as humans, and what triggers those different affects. And so there's really a lot of learning that takes place on how you talk to someone so that way they don't escalate. How you talk to someone so you can really focus, you can help support them in problem solving. But not necessarily, I see somebody that's escalated and here's how I'm going to de-escalate them.
And what's your
question?
Yeah, I guess what I'm thinking of is, maybe it's generational or whatever, but, for many people, your first response, when you would see, students in a disciplinary action, might be, to really react emotionally.
Yell and grab.
Yeah. Or to raise your voice or whatever. And so it seems like that first response of the adult is really important in kind of setting the stage.
And so one of the brain components is understanding that like survival mode, safety. Like if a student doesn't feel safe, they're going to be really, they're going to present themselves in that way. They might be loud, or they might actually completely shut down and not be responsive. So part of the training is just understanding like what you are seeing, and then just reminders for you as the adult, you can't respond with anger. You can't respond in a way that's going to continue to reinforce this unsafe feeling with that student or with that individual, but instead you're going to say, tell me what happened. Let's find a place where we can talk about that. Instead of coming at it like, what are you doing? Why did you do that?
Right.
Which might have happened before.
And what I want to add to that is I think when we think more about restorative justice, like a lot of that goes back to like how it shows up in indigenous communities and how that work really grew, right? And it does have that de-escalation component to it. So there might be some references to that for those who are in the training. So, let me kind of go and dig a little deeper. But when we talk about how it shows up in the restorative practices training for students, that's not something that we might spend a lot of time on based upon how the training is structured. But it's not something that we can't consider and add to it. Yeah. Right? Okay.
Well, I have a long list.
I actually have one general, more like a comment and learning from what you have taken in training. So when there is a conflict, let's say amongst two students or someone took the first punch or whatever, of course you want to talk to them and say, wow, what happened, or how did this happen, kind of thing. But there may be something that happened maybe before, right? Little microaggressions that happen over time, and even though one person took the punch, it could be the other person who's been doing the little microaggressions, right? How do we, one, identify that? Because the teachers are not there all the time to take it, to look up for the students, and then how do we try and address those so that this won't happen as in like a punch?
I think that in another life I would have been a police detective, and that this job has done a great job at training me for that. So in those lines of questions, you would be surprised about when you get into the parts of the questions where you're asking the student about like, how are you feeling? Like, how did you feel when this was said to you? And sometimes they don't have a great answer right away. They might be like, I don't feel anything. Okay. And then I'll bring out my emotion chart and I'll be like, well, tell me in here, in which category are we thinking? And we'll talk about each of those. And eventually, students will land on an emotion. And that emotion usually has a story. And I'm either going to get to that story in that conversation then, or a parent will call me the next day and say, we've had a lot of time to talk. We talked about all the things you asked me to talk about. And they finally told me that 2 months ago, Joey on the bus said this, and it was really, really harmful. And it was really hurtful. And that got all brought back up because Joey said something to so-and-so, and he got really mad, and it brought all that up, and so he socked him. And so then we have a conversation about that, but now we're not only holding that first student accountable, but then we have to go back to Joey and talk to Joey about that incident and say, hey Joey, this happened 2 months ago, and did you know that was still brought up for him? And sometimes Joey will say, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that he would remember that. And so then we have that conversation with the two of them together, and we talk through those things. And we make some commitments at the end about, and understanding, we talk through about how we understand how those words had a negative impact and how those actions then were harmful moving forward. But now that they have a better understanding, Joey now knows he can't say things like that as a joke. And middle schoolers, high schoolers, adults still, we say things without understanding the harm, and then we realize they're harmful and we regret it and we want to do better. So really also this idea of when we know better, we do better. We're constantly teaching. Our words can be hurtful, but we can move forward and we can give the opportunity to do better. And our students do better when they're given the opportunity to.
I guess my question is a little more, so
Yeah.
after the fact,
Yeah.
you could go and talk to Joey and ask, but my thinking is, how do we prevent them from getting to it, right? Just like Joey made that little microaggression, which he didn't even realize it, someone else may have made it too, except he didn't boil.
You're asking about the 80% that's proactive.
Yes, the
Oh,
proactive 80%.
what happens in that 80%? Is that what you're asking?
Kind of, yeah, yes.
I think that in my opinion, I think this last year has been, with our use of Navigate 360, and I'll talk about our Smith experience specifically, we've been using the curriculum once a month to really lean into teaching and learning about concepts that we know our students are struggling with. And so in one of those pieces, we maybe realizing the perspective taking, understanding the importance of our words and walking in someone else's shoes. I'm just naming a couple lessons that I actually was just assigning out to students recently. So we're pushing these out all to the entire building. So it's really looking also at that like MTSS and Tier 1, like we're handing this out, we're doing this learning for all students involved, so we know that everybody has had the same opportunity to learn something. And then also this reoccurring conversation about what our expectations are as it connects to what harassment looks like in the building, and having conversations about bullying or cyberbullying, and having those as a building-wide for all students.
When do those happen? When do those conversations happen?
Well, actually, Ryan and I, Mr. Brinks and I just finished 6th grade today, and this will be our 3rd time going into 6th grade classrooms, and then we're going to continue with 7th. And so just making that part of like our cycle and talking about those pieces. And so that would be the 80%.
That's the lead
Yes,
to the
yes.
students. What you think is benign may hurt someone else and what
Exactly.
it looks like.
Yeah.
And I think a core component of that is the work that is going on right now around middle school advisory.
Yes.
Because that's the kind of learning, that's a component of the kind of learning that would take place in advisory to be part of that 80% preventative.
That's why I was asking, when
Yes.
does that happen?
We have to find time now.
Right.
We'd
So
like to
where is that?
purposely have time.
Yeah.
Nicole, you had,
Excuse me, one that's, so you're talking from your experience as a middle school administrator, and so you then, some of these sessions that you're doing with 6th, 7th, 8th graders, is that being replicated at the high school level? So we're having the same type of sit downs, re-entry, and all of this, we're replicating everything that we're doing at the middle school level and the high school level consistently.
I think consistently is the piece of the pie that's there, because as Chantel shared in that last chart, our goal is to grow in that area. So we had commitments, and so in the 2019-2020 school year, we had a goal to train all of our administrators in summer of 2020, and we weren't able to accomplish that during that time. And so we spent some time talking about how do we bring that back and provide that opportunity for all of our teachers, administrators. Because it's a 2 full day in person, out of the building, training, they need to be together to really
So
work.
is that a no?
That is, it is inconsistent, it is, so let me just clarify.
Okay.
There is alignment around the philosophy of restorative practices. There is a requirement on how we apply restorative practices based on discipline and the law. The implementation of the options and what it looks like vary based on the training of the administrator. So at the bare minimum, what's listed in our code of conduct is happening. So all those restorative pieces that are there, that's happening. But the inconsistency comes to.
But our people aren't all trained.
They're not all trained yet, no.
But is it, are we?
So how can those be happening if our people aren't
Wait,
all
but,
trained?
hold on, I just wanted, so we're talking about this, I don't mind you chiming in.
Yeah.
Are we consistent at middle school, but not consistent at high school, or are we not consistent anywhere in Smith District?
That's what I want to know.
So we have a different application of restorative resources across our middle schools and across our high schools. So the use, so Casey was referring to the use of Navigate 360, which is a new curriculum that's being piloted in a handful of our buildings this year to see if it's useful. So this is the first year we've used those modules.
Or is it
So
in middle school, in high school, and some?
it's being piloted in various buildings, so not across any level. So Athens is piloting it, Smith is piloting it, and we're using some of our grant funds to be able to use that resource so that as a district, we can make the decision of if that's a resource we want to employ across secondary. So Larson's come to the table in the last 2 weeks and said, hey, these look great and Smith's having good outcomes for it. That's something I think we should consider talking about as we move forward. So the application of that tool is different because we're piloting that program in different
And
schools.
to me, it's not the one tool.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to get a sense of, are we good at Smith? Are we good at 1 of 7 secondary schools? Or are we halfway there? Are we a quarter way there? Where are we really with?
Can we back up a slide, because that's the question. That's the question I have. If you look up at the slide, are we 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 right now? We can't be all 5. So where are we?
So right now, we're actually living and leading into 1 through 3. So the capacity and the cultivating, when we talk about the application of the practices and the trainings, you have some people who are trained. We are not the only ones who are trained in foundations. The majority of the CCHS staff, they're completely all trained in foundations for restorative practices.
And there are a number of our secondary administrators who also have that 4-day training as well, secondary administrators, so 6 through 12.
So part of that is bringing us together and then say, okay, now what we're going to do is create a larger training to build that capacity across all of our buildings when we talk about secondary. And we definitely want to think about, okay, what do we have here, and then how does that trickle into training, sort of practice with our elementary level as well. And then the cultivating piece, we are applying those based upon what Michigan law says, what our code of conduct says, and how support shows up. And it's important to also note that the application of restorative practices are not just happening with students. Sometimes that happens in adult settings as well. And so also we are able to model that and bring into those application processes. 4 and 5 speak more to where we want to be, how we want to be.
Right, no, I just wanted to order, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought this was helpful, because that was my thing is, it can't be 1 through 5, so we gotta be somewhere in there. Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, so we are, the capacity is not all built out, and we're not all there, and we're definitely not implementing this consistently, continually at all of our secondary schools. So I think, to me, this is something that, I don't know whether it's in this calendar year, but we need to then
What is the
have an
timetable?
update. We need a timetable update to understand how far we moved in 6 months, in a
Yeah.
year, whatever the time period is, so,
What's our plan?
yeah. So my questions are more general than, okay.
And I think it would be important at some point to just clarify what is consistent. So it's important to know that if we have a situation where we have a suspension, because we'll give the example of a fist fight, okay, a physical fight between 2 students. If we have a suspension due to a physical fight, we have in all of our secondary schools a conversation about what does the initial suspension look like, and what are the restorative components in order to bring that child back sooner That happens at 100% of our secondary schools. Re-entry meetings happen at 100% of our secondary schools. Conversations with parents and individual students happens at 100% of our secondary schools. So I think it's important that when I wavered about the conversation of consistency, it doesn't look the same because the tools are different, but many of the core tenets of restorative practices exist at a very consistent level across all of our secondary schools. So we don't have a school that is suspending and sending kids home without a re-entry meeting at this building. And then at this building, you have an opportunity to do restorative and come back 2 days earlier. There's consistency across how we approach it. It's what the tools are that we're using in that process that differ. So just to clarify where that variance comes in.
So the variance is in the 80% where you do things before anything happens.
Yes, there is variance in that
Sounds
part,
like the
yes.
variance across the. 100%. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I thank you for honing in on some examples. I mean, I know that I did ask that we have some concrete examples for us, and I appreciate you working those into all of this. And some of my questions have been asked by my fellow colleagues here. But like some of the, so like vaping, I understand why vaping is bad. Like I don't think anybody's, arguing that. But the level of like, I mean, if I get a phone call that's like my kid was vaping and this is the kind, like as a parent, you're like, yeah, but like there's not kind of a defensiveness. Like it's pretty clear cut. But I know culturally right now there is a huge increase in racially charged conversation, and so if we've got a kid who has a family that uses a lot of racially charged language and they use racially charged vocabulary at school, like I don't think parents are going to be super excited about some of this. And so to Vitel's point, like I'm just, what are we doing? Because the idea of, and I'm not expecting you to give answers right this minute, but like things that I really want us to be thinking about, if we really care about the humanity of the people in our buildings, what are we doing to make sure that we're protecting the safety of kids when we have families that might have different philosophical homes, and making sure that we're structuring it. And I'm also really concerned about at the high school level when there's true violence. I'm not saying that fist fight's not violent, no one wants to get punched on the bus, but I'm working with a family in a different school district right now where there's sexual violence, and there's SORs, there's legal ramifications, and these families are like, I don't want anyone in jail, like I know jail's not the right solution, but I really don't want this kid and my kid in the same space. And like vaping's a great example, but like restorative practices, like I think there's gotta be a lot. I wanna know that we're doing the work to get to the deeper stuff when we're dealing with traumatic things that are deeper than I was being.
So you want to know about what work is being done to address deeper levels of trauma?
Yeah, I mean, I think like just like what are the like as I listen to all of it, like I think there's just, I see how this works well at a middle school level. Like I see how you can sit in the kinds of conversations and the problems that can happen in a middle school, and how you can have smaller classes and you can do that kind of stuff. And I think there's more, sometimes if you get kids who maybe didn't have some of that character work when they were younger and are more settled in some hurtful behaviors, like how are we helping to foster belonging when people are not excited about the idea of I love that you're saying you're having such great success, but I can think of families that you call and they're like, nope, like I don't want to do that. Like what are we doing when a family's like, I'm not interested in having a conversation with my kid. I don't care.
And I think hate speech is probably because, even before break, I know that the high school's emails went out to parents
secondary level, I assume it's mainly in the high schools in the last couple of months. And so I think that's a good example. So hate speech has increased. What does the discipline and the restorative practices for that specifically look like? And what has the impact been? I mean, has there actually been an impact in the last 3 months, or are things staying the same, or are they getting worse?
So is that an assumption you're making that hate speech is increased in our school? In
That's not
Detroit? No, I'm talking about Detroit schools.
That is not an assumption. Before break, emails went out to the
Oh,
parents.
before break. Okay. I'm just trying to gain clarity.
Yeah, no, this is not an assumption, this is an actual,
But
Okay.
So
then your question, how are we engaging that in a restorative practice?
Yeah, so I mean, it's, because Nicole was saying, if we could get an example, and I think that's a very timely one, because it's happening and it's increased at the secondary level, so.
we don't want to pretend it's not.
Yeah, so with that particular topic, what does the discipline look like, what do the restorative practices look like, and what have the effects been? Because it's, it's been a long enough period of time, so are the things that we're doing actually working?
I guess to follow up, it's not just that incident and the 2 or 3 or 4 individuals that are with that incident.
No, it's
how
what
to
we did.
expand it to our broader school community and to make sure that this is an example, but this is how we shouldn't do it, or this is what we should be thinking about.
So, slightly different question, so I get an answer to that question first.
I was going more off of Nicole, but I would say, maybe just use hate speeches as something where we could get a specific example of, what it looks like and what the effects have been.
So not now, but you want.
Not now, yeah, we're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna suggest that if there's specific things that we wanna study a little bit more, we certainly can.
No, I didn't mean right now, and I don't
Right.
think Nicole meant right now either.
And I think, one of the challenges, and I'll just lean into that example, one of the steps in the restoration of that hurt in our community was the engagement of our families and community in knowing that we needed the partnership in having the conversations and moving forward. So the purpose of that message that was sent at Thanksgiving was to engage our community in partnership around recognizing the language that we need to be using in the Troy School District and naming that.
Yeah, except
Right?
most, except 90% of parents don't read anything that the school district sends out, to be honest, because I'll reference something in the Troy Weekly, school district newsletter, and parents are like, what are you talking about? So the fact that an email went out to the general parent population, to me, doesn't really mean anything, because maybe there were 2 parents who read that and were like, okay, let me tell you, and took the opportunity to actually sit down with their kids and talk about it. So I don't think an email that a large portion of parents don't read is community engagement on, especially if something is increasing or getting worse at a particular level. So I'm just being very honest, because I talk to parents all the time who don't read anything we send out, and then they're like, oh, what are you talking about? And then I have to actually send them screenshots of emails that the district sends out, so.
And I appreciate that perspective. I think it still is a piece of the partnership that we work toward and strive for, using the tools that we have in community with our parents, and recognizing that when you look at the restorative work, it's not one interaction, right? So that was one of many different things that was happening at the time to build awareness around the work that we have as a community. Because as Nicole generated at this table, this is community work, it's not just school work, right? We can't make all of these changes just within our schools. Much of those challenges are the work that we do with our community and partnership with our families. And I think we could certainly study if there's specific areas that the board collectively wants us to focus on. I think there's areas that we could look at.
I think hate speech is definitely something we need to be watching.
I'm very grateful for the high-quality presentation that our speakers gave me, because for the longest time, the student code of conduct was something that went on a shelf that hardly was utilized by me in all the years I've been here. But you have developed this into a world-class presentation that said, we we went from words to reality to something world-class that says, now we have a vehicle that we can work with that puts us miles ahead of what I see many other districts are engaged in. Your work is very valuable to us as a community and as a school district, and I'm very grateful for the in-depth presentation that I just heard.
No, I've got knowledgeable questions, so I'm not going to do them tonight. We'll have to set up another time. And I just asked one question about, we know that absenteeism is one of the number one factors for long-term failure. And we know that suspensions are typically administered to kids of color, particularly boys of color, more than other populations. And so I was really concerned over overheads we're talking about. Well, of course we have to suspend. Of course we have to suspend. And so my question is, under restorative practices, have we reduced the incidences or the violations that result in a suspension? Have we reduced the length of those suspensions? Are we switching to in-school suspensions instead of out-of-school suspensions, because the idea is not to exclude those kids? And the idea of pulling a kid out of school for 3 days is you're just setting that kid up for failure long-term, over and over and over again. And so I'm sitting here hearing this going, are we learning anything? You know, the data would tell you don't suspend those kids. So are we changing our practice?
Can I just comment on that?
Yeah.
I did not at all want to give that impression that that this suspension is the first go-to. Sometimes it is the most appropriate, because whatever that harm that has been done.
So that was my
and those-
question, is have our number of suspensions declined since we began to adopt restorative practices? If it hasn't, I would argue we're probably not following restorative practices with So I'm curious about that. You may not have the answer now, but you know, I want to try to understand. I really want to see how we're changing our practices, because the reason that the state is pushing towards restorative practices is because it was suspend for years, and we saw where that got us. You know, so
I can think of I think that's another great data point we could look at. You know, Ramo would be a wonderful person to engage in that conversation as well, because you know, back in 2019, when I came to Troy, so that's my first data point, any fight was an immediate 10-day suspension. Immediate, there was no question, 10 days. And that's the code of conduct. If you're gonna engage in a physical fight at the high school, you're the 10-day suspension. And that was just like a go-to alignment of administrators across high school. And so there's a lot more nuance around that now, right? So it could be a 10-day suspension, but there's so many factors that weigh into the decision of that suspension. So if the safety of the community and the child, right, is first and foremost. So when we have a scenario where we have concerns of safety, removal from school is the first step, and then we start to work through what happens from that. But I can tell you that the restorative factors have benefited more than just that disciplinary component. It has also benefited how our schools operate. So when I think about our two traditional high schools, Troy High School and Athens, students were traditionally recommended for removal from Troy High School and Athens to attend Troy College and Career High School because of attendance and behavior. And it was a really strict, you don't have this amount of credits by the time you get to your junior year, there's not a place for you here. And so as we've worked through our restorative practices around how do we engage students, how do we ensure they're part of the community, how do we establish a sense of belonging, how do we ensure that they have access to learning, you all know as a board how Troy College and Career has evolved, right? And how it can't just be Troy College and Career evolving. Those two schools that service Troy College and Career have to evolve too, so that we can all be part of that same microcosm. So it relates directly to that punitive discipline piece, but it also relates to how do we operate with kids' behaviors in our high schools.
Right.
But I think there are good data points out of that as well.
Okay. I have other things, but I think I'll set it for another time. Does anybody have anything else? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, it's been great coming here so much.
Yeah, Dr. Youngs. Well, stay right here. Just a.
They're leaving you for a spot.
Just had an opportunity since taking on this new role to engage and just work with Dr. Yancy, Kimber, and Tante, and the rest of the team that will be introduced, and not necessarily here. But it's been an exciting learning opportunity for me as well. So tonight, what we want, just as restorative practices, there's multi-variable, right? Multi-things we're doing, and the on our journey with the National Equity Project, we have another opportunity with this equity inquiry team that we're going to tell you a little bit about tonight. But it's all part of the operation and trying to make us a better district, right? And this specifically ties into the red pillar work that we're doing. And so we are excited to inform you. This is just kind of an information piece here of this team, where it's come from, and where we believe it's going with the district. It's being led by Dr. Yancy, and we are excited to inform you about it and tell you where we're going with it. So with that.
Well, you did a wonderful job of kind of giving the background, so I won't go back into that. But I do think it's important to know who's a part of this equity inquiry team, and as it relates to the redesign network that we're in with the National Equity Project. We've been in this partnership for many years, and this year we have an equity inquiry team, and so it's a cohort of individuals, and we work cohesively to build and share knowledge about experiences that our students are having, that adults in our communities are having, in those learning conditions. We are going to do, in this first year, create a systems map. So we are in what we call the landscape analysis phase of this redesign network. So we're just seeing, right? We're talking about the equity imperatives. We're talking about how does restorative practices show up, all those things. And then we're thinking about, is this where we want to focus and expand it to year 2 when we create an equity design team, and then think about year 3 when we actually choose one equity imperative and work on redesigning a system that impacts our district, but definitely for the better. So a part of this group is myself. We have Kate Rainey, who is our curriculum and instruction specialist for math at secondary. Rick West, the deputy superintendent. Julia Alders, she is our curriculum instruction specialist for math elementary. Kendra Montante, our director of communications and strategic initiatives. Jonathan Cross, who is the principal at Baker Middle School, and Amanda Fisher, who is our curriculum and instruction specialist for ELA. So a big part of working cohesively as a team was to think about what would our purpose be? What would we be focusing on? And so we know that at the beginning of the year, Dr. Macheski named to our district this concept of belonging. And so we sat with that and we said, okay, if we are going to lean into this concept of belonging, we need to think about the purpose. And so the purpose of the 12-week team exists to learn as much as possible about how students are experiencing belonging in our school district. And this point is to determine a system that can be redesigned in the following years. And so our primary focus again for this year is to conduct the landscape analysis that I talked about and leveraging the disaggregated data. So we're breaking down the data points. We're thinking about all of what that encompasses. We're leaning into listening sessions for students, staff, families, and then we're going to work towards bettering and deepening our understanding of how people define belonging and the conditions that lead to a greater sense of belonging, particularly when we think about those students who are furthest from the opportunity. So we needed a question. Like, okay, so we're gonna do this work, but what will be our driving question? And so we landed on what would make someone feel more connected and welcome at school? And how do we experience, as a district, as one Troy, this concept of belonging? And another piece of that is we began to engage in a book study as a cohort team, and then we also brought our cabinet team along, our cabinet leadership along, and we're digging into belonging. And this basically is helping us to definitely frame our minds around what literary scholars are saying about this, what other districts may be leaning into, and just the work and the understanding of belonging as a concept and an embedded practice for our district. And so, of course, with this too, we took some time to research. If we're going to dig into and think about belonging, we've been on this journey for quite some time, although we may have just named it, out loud. We wanted to focus in on some of the leading indicators that are important when we think about how our students are experiencing belonging. And so what is driving this is having a culturally relevant curriculum. So activities activities, assignments that might ask them how they're experiencing identity, genius, joy to their classrooms, culturally relevant teaching, where teachers also care about these concepts. They are also thinking about how they show up. And this is establishing some classroom norms and some respect, and it's creating some connections between teacher and student in those classroom environments, which then brings us to the classroom community approach. So then creating that comfortability. So it might be uncomfortable at first, but we lean into that discomfort, and then we get into that classroom community approach and thinking about, and we start to think about how can we get more comfortable with our students asking questions and asking for that help to their teachers, and then teachers and students both feel like they can succeed when we think about creating a large community and fostering that greater sense of belonging. Expectations, feedback, and assessment. So we start to think about what does this look like with opportunities to redo assignments, to learn from our mistakes, to think about how grades impact that sense of belonging, and still being able to communicate and have those high expectations for all students, and for those students to feel that as well. We're doing this in a culturally responsive way. And then conversations about race. So engaging in conversations, recognizing that race is a part of who we are, who we all are, and it's a part of our identity, and helping us to all feel positive to better understand what does that mean and how they will engage in that in the larger society and in their communities.
So are these five, is this what our team has come up with, or is this coming out of the book Belonging?
So this was from Equal Opportunity School. So this was a part of when we first gathered as a team and we started to think about what would be our equity imperative.
Okay.
And we said, if we're going to sit with belonging, why?
Okay.
And so we spent some time thinking about, well, why is this even
I just wondered
important?
where it was sourced from,
Yes.
whether you developed it or whatever. Okay.
So here is just a visual of what it will look like and what is happening currently in year one of the landscape analysis. So we are engaged in a framework that goes along with this is see, engage, act. So we're in the see phase. Some things that are already happening is that we're capturing data with adult experiences, student experiences. We're leaning into those listening sessions. And then it gives you a roadmap of how we will then engage community, how we will then engage you all in this process of thinking about the data that we've collected, specifically leaning into what we've learned over year one, and then helping us to think about what year two will look like when we want to engage more of One Troy, when we want to have you all come alongside of us in collaboration and in the work to envision the next step of the journey that we're on with this network. And here is the full scale view of what years 1, 2, and 3 will look like. And so we have already done the summer, the coaching things. We filled out the interest form. We talked about who we are. We formed our team. We went to the launch, and we're here in the landscape analysis, and we're working towards these things. And then for year 2 and year 3, we know that we're learning, and we're doing some leading for equity. It includes some full district learning, some application, some knowledge, some engaging. And then year 3 gets us into that redesign approach, right? Now we are ready to think about and to actually act and actualize redesigning a part of our system as it relates to an equity imperative and what we have named here as belonging, as the concept that we are leaning to dig into. Any questions with just that quick little overview? Yes.
One, I'm excited to see this all as happening. And I think my question's probably for Rick than for you, but where does mental health fall into this? Like, I know that we talked about when you said, yeah, the woman who went back and forth between here and U of M doing different things, like Laura, she worked for Troy High and did some like district stuff.
I know who you mean, and I'm blanking on her
Yeah,
name.
so, but anyway, like, and I know that she left to do higher ed, but like, having that as like when we think about equity and belonging, knowing that there's some state funds for equity and belonging, like, is there a way to bring a therapist person into it? I know Novi's doing that, I know Avondale's doing that, they're bringing in.
I think there's opportunity when we talk about, the state's really focused on, and we got a preview of the governor's budget, is focused on mental health and safety and security in particular. So we know that there's additional resources or targeted resources rather for for mental health supports. We've been very strategic, I think, in increasing mental health supports throughout the organization over the last couple of years, certainly with the federal dollars that we have. And it is a variable, as we mentioned, the restorative practice.
So that's, I mean, I'm just, as I'm listening to all this, I'm like, I would like to see that piece added.
Yeah, and it's all part of the equation. It's all part of creating the environments that we're trying to create. It's part of the research. It's us digging in and trying to figure out how do we create those environments for sense of belonging for all of our students. And certainly we can't. We have to dig into the mental health supports as well. We know that's a factor, particularly among our adolescent kids. So leaning into that, understanding how we can best utilize those resources, talking as a cabinet team on a routine basis of what resources we have available to us and how we allocate those resources and utilize them is going to be part of the work moving forward as well. We typically do that with social work, psychologists, counselors. We have those throughout the district, and you know, they've been invaluable resources for our students. But looking at the additional resources we may have over the course of the next couple of years is something that we'll continue to do to support our efforts.
Yeah, that's, I just, like, as I look at that, I mean, that's the one component that I would like to see sort of rounded out, because it's all, like, I noticed you've got core curriculum pieces, core, like, development, like, you've got really good rounded, but I just, that piece.
I only have one comment. That summer engaging the students part, anything that came out of it, they thought, I didn't think about that kind of thing, or anything about from the students that were engaged. Different, yeah. You engaged with them last fall, right? In 2023, right?
So we began to, so in the fall, what we began to develop was the framework in order to engage it. So for example, one of those things is the Hanover survey. So working on changing the face of what that survey looks like, and then preparing that for the launch. Definitely beginning to have some experiences. That when we went to, the team went to San Francisco for the initial launch. We got to not only engage with conversations about student experiences from our district, but other districts across the country as well. And so this work will actually continue on. And so although this was like, okay, let's just target it in fall, it's actually already interwoven into what's happening in the winter. So it's going to be more student engagement that's happening right now that you'll see. Then it was just like we were still forming, and then we were planning and framing what student engagement looks like. For example, the Student Equity Council, their experiences were deeply rooted in kind of helping us to think and frame. But now we want to go bigger, we want to go deeper. So when we talk about the listening sessions, then that is more of an opportunity for us to engage more with students and adults in this winter.
What will this look like?
So a part of what that looks like is bringing in some of our admin to help us, so our building leaders to help us design what those questions might look like based upon the experiences that they're having. Also, it will be involving families into that process as well, developing these questions and then thinking about what schools that do we want to focus on. So for example, we have named to focus on kind of transition levels when we talk about experiences with belonging. So we're kind of narrowing down where we're going to start with it, and then we'll allow the building leaders to assist us in the process of thinking through what implementation looks like. How do we capture student listening sessions? So, for example, when we've done it at the middle school level, it is usually the leader or high school leader. Usually the building principal is the one who is kind of considered like the safe person. They know their building administrators. They are comfortable with them. They know what's happening. The questions are happening from that administrator. I might be there, and before there were National Equity Project partners who were there with us, capturing in real time. We would ensure the students, their names and identities were redacted, creating that safe space. We would share with them the questions. We would have that open dialogue. It would maybe go for about 30 to 45 minutes. And then the process now that we want to make sure that we do is re-engaging those students. After we've captured those listening sessions and we've developed what we feel that it's, okay, we've had good data set, we want to take this back, bringing this back to the students and letting them see that, okay, what I shared with you, I can actually see it showing up this way. So it shows that we're still developing.
Pick a building, how many kids did you talk to? Was it during the day?
During the
I just
day,
wanna-
sure.
Specific.
Larson Middle School, about 20 students.
How were they selected?
They are selected, so it depends on, if that particular listening session was about a specific curriculum they focused on, or a class. They are selected by including teachers who know them. We include students at the time that may have been in, students who may have needed more support, students who feel like they don't need as much support in their classrooms. If we look at how diverse the group is, we want to make sure that we are having a diverse perspective of who's in the space and the voices that we are capturing. But again, it might be specific to what we need. With belonging, we can have a larger landscape when we think about what that student population looks like. And then we choose the questions, we make sure the questions are definitely something that the students can easily digest, and then share out some of their feelings or their lived experiences. And then after we wrap everything up and we've talked about and we've kind of front-loaded what's gonna happen and why is this important for you to share your voice, then we might discuss how we're gonna follow up with them. And that follow-up is something that happens from their building leaders and administrators. But it's usually about maybe 30, 40 minutes tops.
It's during the school day?
It's during the school day.
Okay. And so at a middle school level, then, do we use the same set of questions as we move to other middle school levels?
So in the past, we have used the same set of questions, but then it might change. For example, when I say it might change, maybe there's just something else that's added on that's happening at the high school.
But the base questionnaire.
Base questions are all the same, yes.
Thank you. I just was trying to understand how many kids have been involved in how we do it.
So just to clarify, the listening sessions are already happening or haven't started?
The listening sessions have not started. Other pieces of the data capture have. But as it relates or pertains to us doing the parts with Elevate and the questions centered around belonging, there is a structure that we're following. So it's a handover survey, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to implement these other pieces of Catalyze and Elevate. One is adult conditions-based, one is student conditions-based, along with our listening sessions. All of these things align and they go along with giving us a really great landscape view of what we hope to capture when we think about data sets and bringing in the lived experiences of our students, of our teachers, of our families and communities, staff in general, of our stakeholders, in order for us to get to the point where we're at board engagement, and we're having these conversations with you all, and we're thinking about the design team for next year.
So I was gonna say to clarify, they did do listening sessions before,
So what was that? The Larson session, the listening sessions haven't started, but you had
They
some
weren't
Larson-
related to belonging, to this belonging concept in
What
this.
was that then?
Those related more to curriculum, or they might be
So it's a
specific.
completely different thing?
Yes, it's complete. So listening sessions do happen, but as it pertains to this model that we're following and this redesign network, we have an arc in the timeline, and it takes us through, and we are getting ready to engage in those listening sessions based on this landscape analysis.
Okay, then Nicole.
So did you guys put together this plan from different pieces, or are you following like a timeline from like, yeah?
We are following a very detailed timeline. And I do know that you all have, okay, the arc is available to you for you to see where that timeline looks like for us.
Well, no, I just meant like, did somebody else create it, or did you guys?
Oh, no. So this here was the generalized, like, national equity project, how districts might engage in their landscape analysis. However, we have a lot of influence on, for example, we want to pull listening sessions and student data into winter with adults. And so that piece, we were able to move along. This came directly from their kind of roadmap of how to walk all districts through an aligned practice and a structure of the landscape analysis for year one.
And it's a reminder, it's a 3-year.
No, oh, yeah, no,
engagement,
and
so
I'm-
next year there'll be a roadmap as well.
No, I'm good, that's, I just, because like you said, you're using the listen and then cultivate and equate, and so like, I just wasn't sure if they, because sitting with Mr. Schmidt for long enough, you said, you know, the importance of like the same questions and all
Yeah.
those kinds of things, so I'm just like, are you Like, is it that you like this piece from this organization and this piece from this organization, or did NEP say like, hey, use these things together because they partner really well? You know, and it's just like, and it sounds like you're looking for ways that they work together, and so I was just curious how you're choosing your pieces.
Yeah, the team has spent a lot of time, I think, determining some of those pieces, right? And in the sense, Chantal mentioned the transitions, we're really looking at those transitions because we know that that's a difficult time for a lot of kids, right? You transition from one school to the next, it's sort of uncomfortable, right? You don't know if you belong, right? So that's part of the reason why we spent a lot of time going over, okay, which grades, what levels, where are we digging in? So there's a lot of conversation that goes into it, a lot of reasoning, a lot of time and effort and energy, I think, going into a lot of this business.
And another point is when we do have a time we are thinking about why do we want to add in Elevate or Catalyze, or should we use these? Is Hanover giving us enough? And we're like, well, we need to go deeper, right? And so even the work that we're doing in IoT with street data, it takes us from satellite to the map to the street. And the street is the listening sessions. That's when we're like right there with the students. We get to hear directly from them or the families or our staff about what they're experiencing. But then when we think about the map, that's the classroom setting, right? So that's what the teacher gets to experience with the students, and they get to do that. And our Hanover survey gives us this broader view of how we're experiencing it overall. And so we were taking all of these pieces. We felt as a team it was necessary to have all three pieces. And then Catalyze is the adult component of that. So we're giving our staff an opportunity to engage too. We need all of these things to really give us a greater sense of how we experience belonging and what do we do with what we find out.
So it says late spring for board engagement, is May-ish, or what are we thinking? Yeah, we got back to us.
Well, we're kind of a little bit ahead of the game of April because we're here, we're engaging right now. But it's going to continue, right? So we're grateful to be right here in front of you, being able to share some of the where we are right now. And then yes, late spring, because the Hanover survey usually comes back May or April. So we need to get that back. We need to finish.
So the next time with us will be sharing out more of those insights that we're seeing.
Insights, and then definitely not just sharing here, but with our community, all stakeholders, what we captured, the why, and how we're moving forward. But then doing some collaborative thought partnership on what that looks like in year two.
Thank you.
Right, you're welcome.
Rick. Yes. Rick.
I was like,
She's good up there, eh?
That's what she does.
Per usual. She making me stay here all night.
Oh, I'm hanging. Some kids will come home.
Make sure this chair did not float into space.
what brings you back to the district?
I didn't know. I feel that baby's here. Good to see you too. got a son and I got a son and 2 daughters, 2 girls and him. So I got a kindergarten and a 5th grader and a 7th grader in Larson. How have you been?
So what, I understand this is a workshop, what are you trying to accomplish with this?
With the workshops, this is more of a listening session for us to learn what's going on with the district. So each time they bring up a topic or engage us and take direction from us. This is a working session.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're always engaged. So this time it's about restorative practice of assessment. So for this one, there is a learning part, there is the business part, and then there is the
So I spoke to her before,
Chantal.
during the break. Well, not Chantal.
Kendra?
I was saying, one of my questions is how do we bridge the gap from the administrative side?
So that's what the teaching, that's what training is, that's what our PD.
I get that, but at the same time, when a student comes in and gets suspended, there's a huge wall where they don't share a lot of that information with the teachers. Maybe the individual teacher that student has a relationship, none of the other students that, not the other teachers
that the student has.
Well, you know, they, and where do we get that transparency? We could, I think the teachers want to help as much as we
Yeah, so it can be a help and a hurt situation too, so you gotta be careful. So there's also, these are minors, there's also legal stuff involved.
I agree, I know.
So, I don't know. Good question.
You follow what I'm saying?
I know.
Because, and
There is apparently,
from my experience,
had I known,
99% of the teachers in the building are coming from a place
With
where
a good heart.
they
Yes.
don't, they're not looking to exploit.
Honestly, I don't think a lot of it's happening. It's very rare that you hear once or twice. So, but I get your point.
But we have, you know, like the hate speech that you were talking about. There's been numerous cases of stuff.
And then kind doesn't know what's happening.
Arab students being called terrorists, you know, minorities being called all the time.
Or something, because we don't live in a vacuum. We live with our own baggage, right? And
And then she also brought up a good point that there are some families that are going to be you know, and I get it. You're not going to reach everybody. So I mean, but how do we start to educate on that level?
I agree.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take it. Yeah. I think you're doing an incredible job. Thank you. Being put on that way.
Intense.
I was saying that one of my biggest concerns is
Oh, you lost the green one.
Okay, let's move on. Course subscription book and new graduation requirements.
All right, well, Natalie and I are excited to be here tonight to walk through annually our high school course description book updates and some changes to our graduation requirements. So on that first just overview, and we were able to share this with you a little bit ahead of time, but is to identify, we have some course updates, so we won't go deeply into those. The course updates really just represent some name changes in alignment with some of our business courses, so there are small tweaks in names, so that's the renaming of business courses. That was brought to us by, maybe I should start by saying, there's been a really concerted effort in the alignment between Troy High and Troy Athens when we work on our course description book and those courses that are offered, as well as the curriculum that's being taught within those courses. And so Alina Wolberg does a really nice job. She's our head of business at Troy High, but working in partnership with our business team at Athens. They work through renaming these business courses so that we have alignment between the two buildings. Same thing with our computer science. So our computer science course alignment has to do with aligning the course as a full year course between both schools. Our two computer science teachers coming together to work on what that looks like, and not only aligning the name, but also the course description. So we're ensuring that our students are provided with that consistency across buildings.
Do we have a different computer science course that's not AP computer science?
We do. Right? Yeah, good. And then on the right-hand column is our new courses, and we're going to spend just a few minutes highlighting some of those in this slide ahead. So yeah, I'll let you jump into those.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully it goes without saying, but all of our changes represent moving more towards deep learning, more towards rigor for all students. So we wanted to kind of unpack some of the new courses that we have. So one is AP Art History. So this is an example of a course that is interdisciplinary. We have run this in the past, I believe, at TCCHS, but never at Troy High in Athens. So we have a teacher who is interested in running this, a social studies teacher. So hopefully you had a chance. I'm not going to read the description, but hopefully you had a chance to read those.
Can I ask you a question about that? Is that actually, is it more history class or more art class or some combination? I mean, are they students physically doing art while they're learning about the history of art? Or is it really all learning about history?
I looked through the syllabus. It doesn't seem like they're doing art. It's more a focus on learning about history. Yes, how history and context shapes art and architecture.
It's a social studies credit, right?
I was gonna say, but does this count for the social studies graduation?
This is yes, so it's a history, geography.
It's, yeah, so that currently, as it's being proposed, it's being proposed to be taught by a social studies teacher. And so the AP College Board does not require us to have certain teachers with certain certifications teach courses. So they could be taught by art teacher as well. And so what we are doing in this pilot year as we bring it on board is we're going to see how many students we have who are interested, see how many sections we can run. And then the teacher who has proposed it will be offered the first section. If we have multiples, we may be able to offer it to other teachers and other departments and look at where that credit lies. So it's effectively an elective credit in our world of what's happening at the high school and can fall in either art or social studies.
So a couple of questions.
I was just gonna say, I mean, when we talk about the flexibility of the merit curriculum, and we talk about like kids who don't want to take World 2 because they're tired of learning the same history over and over and over again, and they want to opt for this, and they choose this as a graduation requirement instead of, so that they meet that social studies.
This does not fall in lieu of a required course for social studies. It can fall in as a social studies elective.
Well, but we don't, I mean, the only social studies required courses, GovEx and US history, so like they're not required to have World 2. So can they take this in lieu of World 2?
So
even though that's what traditionally kids take.
So I'm just going to go ahead real quick here to the slide that shows our graduation requirements. So that we can talk about that for a minute. We're at the end, we were on. So in Troy, we required it specifically called out 1 credit of world history and geography.
Then why do we let so many kids opt out of it?
So there's a personal curriculum component that the state allows for that to happen, that the Board of Education is approved of providing that personal curriculum. So there's different ways to be able to move through our required courses, but it's specifically named for world history and geography here as one credit. So for the purpose of AP Art History, it cannot replace what's named there, but it could be one of the electives that fall into that. Unless you have a personal curriculum written, that's just how our current structure is determined.
I'll table this conversation for another time.
Sure. Yeah, I think we can definitely lean into graduation requirements and personal curriculum and the flexibility of the Michigan Merit. I know that that's something that's of interest of the board to talk more about. And I think that is something that we are very open to. Natalie and I have actually had quite a few conversations about future flexibility.
My question is more about the process of how you decide to offer a course, like this particular one. How did it come about? Other than the fact that a teacher is willing to teach it, I assume there's got to be better arguments. More the students are asking for it, or is there a certain thing? So just want to understand how you go about doing that.
So we have a high school curriculum council for whenever we're going to offer a new elective. So typically it happens that a teacher thinks they have a group of students that would be interested, or they have talked to the department and they see that as a need in the department, or whatever the case may be. And then they bring that idea to the high school curriculum council, and then that takes, so the high school curriculum council is all of our high school department heads from every kind of area. So it's every core area, family consumer science, every department that is in the room along with our administrators. And so they bring that idea, and then they propose what the syllabus would be, they talk about the content of the course, and then a week later or 2 weeks later, they come back and get feedback, answer questions, and then the team basically, talk about, is this an opportunity that we can see fitting in for students? Is there a need for this? Because sometimes proposals will come forward where it's like, well, we already teach that in this class, or that's already covered in this class. So having that whole interdisciplinary team there to kind of think about, is this a missing opportunity?
That's how we
yeah.
Okay. Now, for example, social studies, we already offer a whole bunch of electives, and you're only requiring 3, and the personal curriculum only 2 to be honest. Do you then decide, well, you're offering 20 different social studies electives, should we drop something else to allow for more, or do you think in those terms as well?
So our departments tend to be the ones that lead out the courses based on student interest, but our schedule at the high school, and also at the middle, but more so at the high school, is very student driven. So we provide out for students all the different options, and many options are there, and then we look at which ones get the biggest pull, and it changes from year to year. And then we run that number of sections, and then the ones that have maybe 5 or 10 kids sign up, those students get called down to the counseling office. They're told you need to pick another elective, or here's your alternative. So we have like a month in April that we call cleaning. We're cleaning the scheduling, and that's really where we're trying to move kids right over into one area or another, so that we have optimal size classes.
That's why I was wondering this need.
Yeah, and so obviously if no one signs up, that's feedback from the department.
Yes.
They're both interested in the course.
Or if it hasn't run over 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So.
What is the minimum number of kids for a high school basketball?
Our goal is more than 18. Typically, on any of our other classes, 20 is what we shoot for, but we tend to have, we don't run any under 18, and we see 18 in some of our AP level language classes. So when we commit to kids that we're going to try and get you through that 4 or 5 year experience, and we have 18 students, we financially, it's really kind of a financial decision. For many of our students, if we're not running a class that's a higher level class that had 18 kids sign up for it, many of those students would take that course in dual enrollment, or we'd offer it to them in partnership with a college or university, and then we'd be paying out about $800 per kid for them to be going to that dual enrollment course. And then we think about what would it cost us to hire a teacher for a point to teach that class, and then we try to make the smartest decision so that we're not losing money.
Thank you.
So this is a course actually that's being led with Evans, or Social Studies Curriculum Instruction Specialist, and he is working interdepartmentally with several ELA teachers and social studies teachers to create a disciplinary course called Stories issues in our modern era. And then also, if the course culminates in students doing a self-reflection or a reflection of something from their own culture or family community. So they're really trying to think about and help kids make connections between themselves, historical events. Yeah,
This
so
might
it's
go
really,
fun.
it's
It seems like a
really,
really
yeah.
fun thought.
And I wanted to specifically, Nancy, you had talked about, at a previous board meeting about that idea of like blue pillar projects.
Yes.
And so this would be an example of a little bit how we're trying to think about, so that it doesn't feel so much like an event, but it like is woven in, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
this would be an example of like where we're trying to intentionally do that, so.
And this
Work
is
on
real.
building this has started already.
This is half credit yearly because there's a lot of writing involved,
And
reflection.
reading, yeah.
And reading,
Yeah.
okay. You know, it's the half credit history and half yearly, I was thinking.
Okay, and then, like Christine mentioned, our business department is always reflecting, thinking about, what could be added to round out, their course offerings. So we have 2 courses from that. So we have, digital business along with business law and management. I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at these.
So in sciences, we are continuing to move forward with the updates that Marie provided, I believe it was last year, even the year before, as we were talking about our pathways in science. So our graduation requirements are kind of spelled out there in purple. When we look at our 9th graders typically taking biology, our 10th graders then moving into a 1 semester chemistry and 1 semester physics. And our 11th graders taking either environmental science, human impact, or AP environmental science. This requirement changes with this year's freshmen, so the class of 2027. Yep, so the students who are currently in bio, next year they'll be taking that half semester chem and half semester physics. You guys will remember from coming to visit what the experience was like in our chemistry class when we were visiting that new chemistry curriculum. This year we'll be implementing our new physics curriculum, so there's been quite a bit of work that's been going on with both of our Tri-High and Athens Science Department. That's really been put together masterfully by Marie Woodman, as she's brought in experts from the field and partnerships with Michigan State University. And this really moves us toward the all credits or all standards for all students. Right, so you'll remember in the past we had students who have never taken a chemistry or physics before they left high school. This provides them with access to all of the standards that high schoolers should be exposed to.
What will that mean for kids who are current sophomores? So like, knowing that next year there will be a half year physics credit, like if they, because traditionally at the high schools they do biology and then a year of chemistry, but then now next year if there's that half of a physics, like will next year's juniors have the option of taking a half of physics and a half of environmental, or will they?
Are they grandfathered in?
Yes,
Or
they
will
can.
there be a solid 1 year physics experience?
So Chem 1 is matched with Chem 2 and Physics 1 is matched with Physics 2. So any student who wants to take a full year will be able to do that, and that will be provided for them. So for any student who's currently a sophomore, they'll have access to the semesterized version, or they'll be able to take the two back to back. So there's increased flexibility for those students. And
So
then
that means everybody gets the new curriculum.
everyone gets
Even if,
right.
not just,
Correct.
not just the freshmen, so
Right,
everyone
yes.
gets opportunity. Cool.
So that would be another example of deep learning as a project, our curriculum is designed to deep learning.
Right.
At the center of it.
Right. That's cool, so we're able to
Right.
make that whole transition for everybody clear, okay.
I'm not confused by it, but it's very confusing.
This graphic or?
No, not this graphic.
Yes, this graphic.
We thought this was busy too.
I had a hard time with this graphic today, I know
No,
last
the
time.
naming of the chemistry classes, so you have chemistry 1, which is a half credit that's required, and chemistry 2 that's a half credit that's optional. Both of those are prerequisites for something you call chemistry 2 AP. So it makes it seem like you have a chemistry 2 and a chemistry 2 AP that are like an algebra and an honors algebra 1, right? So if you look in the actual course, like I know my daughter's gonna be 9th graders, so they actually look through the course book. It says chemistry 2, or there's chemistry 2 AP, and it makes it seem like it's a similar subject matter, but it's not.
But you would
You
never
have to
go.
take chemistry 2, take chemistry 2 AP,
Yeah.
so the namings.
So it should just say AP chemistry.
Yeah,
that's, we
It does not.
Okay, so we'll just need to fix that.
Yeah, because
That's
it makes it seem like the chemistry 2 and the chemistry 2 AP are an English 2 and an English 2 AP. So I think, I don't have the actual course book with me. And I think it might be the same thing with physics, right? So even here you have AP Physics 2. So I think you need to check that wherever you have it.
So just so that you know, with AP Physics 2 exists because there is an AP Physics 1. It's just built into our regular physics curriculum.
Right, but there's also Physics 2.
Because now it's physics.
So, that's what I'm saying, I'm not
That
confused,
makes sense
it's
to
just
me.
confusing, I understand what the flow is, it's just not.
So Christine, I did have a question about that, check boxes.
Well, if the kids don't or parents don't understand.
No, it's
Since
important.
Physics 2 covers pretty much everything with AP Physics 1.
Yep.
Can the students on their own take an AP Physics 1 test, even though the class is not considered an AP class? And then do we give an elevated credit or GPA?
No, because the course is not submitted for alignment with the AP College Board for syllabus or GA course.
Okay.
So, but students are eligible to be able to take that AP test, yes.
Okay, all right.
That's a great question.
Do we advertise that then?
I don't know if that's in that course description, but we should make that transparent.
Yeah, they should let them know if they want to take it, they can take it. And when we don't call it, and you don't get a elevated GPA for it,
So this is science, so what the science team has also done, and I think is important to point out, is they've tried to identify the industry connections to the classes, right? So if I have a career and a passion in some of these areas, here's some electives I might want to explore. They were passionate about making sure that that was there so kids could start to think about what it is that I might want to be interested in.
And we wanted to preface by saying part of the support with helping students understand this is not if you don't take one of these, you can't be a chemist. But we wanted them to go back to the idea of deep learning. This is a pathway, if this is a real interest passion for you, that you could. So we just wanted to make sure that we prefaced it with that.
I have another question, even for a kid who wants to take, quite a few science classes. One, kind of the suggested pathways, why chemistry 1 and chemistry 2 are typically shown as separated across grade levels, because to me, it would make sense if I'm gonna go towards chemistry AP, if you're gonna be taking chemistry 2 a year after you've taken chemistry 1, you lose that continuity. So, is there a reason it's shown this way? Is there, I guess.
So that's, I think, a great question, and I align completely to your logic, and that is the first conversation that I engaged in with Marie when she presented this as the preferred pathway. And I asked her that because to me it made more sense. Why wouldn't we go Chem 1, Chem 2, Physics 1, Physics 2? And so she explained to me that the science department met to really talk about the implications of students being paired up that way and pathways. So they were building out pathways for kids and using tests of other students that they've had in common pathways. And it is the high school science teacher's preferred pathway for the students to take Chem 1, Physics 1, if they're going to double
Get
up.
exposure to
So
both.
so that's
And then
their
make their
thinking.
decision
So,
after, yeah.
Because if I take Chem 1, but I haven't taken physics yet, I might be in an elective that actually I would rather have my elective in physics. So like if sort of the required and they get exposure and experience and they see, oh, I have no interest in taking Chem 2, I'm going to take physics 2. So that was.
So it was something that it was counterintuitive to me, but something that they were very passionate about. And we know we can collect feedback and study how this works out, but it was very much exposure and then satisfying some prerequisites so that they could move into different campus.
So we have Physics 1 and Physics 2 up in the pink and purple, but then they have engineering physics as a prerequisite for AP Physics 2. So is engineering physics could a kid take engineering physics rather than Physics 1 and 2, or do they have to take Physics 1 and 2, engineering physics, and AP Physics?
So engineering physics is not a prerequisite to any other course, but what that shows is that you can take engineering physics after you take physics 1. So you can take any of the electives below after you take physics 1. Or you could take it your senior year also. So it shows up on both 10th grade and then 11th and 12th. But it's not in the book. Everyone takes bio, chem 1, physics 1, and then either either environmental science, human impact, or AP environment. So those are the
This one
requirements.
is super confusing for me too.
Starting-
I looked at it and I go, what?
Yeah,
I know,
starting
it's
with
hard
this
to
freshman,
explain.
this freshman goes on, yeah.
So are there, engineering physics is more, from what I know, is more application of physics. It's usually what I've learned. So are there elements in physics too that are required to be learned before they get to engineering physics?
No, there's components in physics 1 that need to be learned before engineering physics.
But engineering physics is a whole year, so they can't take them in person.
Correct. But if they took physics 1 in 9th grade, they could take engineering physics and physics 2 currently, if they want to take all that physics. In there. Right?
There's no overlap between those?
If you look at the course description, they feel that they're different courses, and they're with different intentions. So based on what you're applied
Yeah.
versus
So
pursuing
one's
AP.
more theoretical, one's more applied, but some concepts.
Exactly. I think you would need to learn physics basic concepts before you do engineering physics, but I don't know what's in physics.
Trust the teacher on that.
Right, exactly.
Can I ask you,
Comment on that.
I know something that you've worked really hard at is trying to reduce unnecessary prerequisites. So as you look at this new setup, have you succeeded?
So I think one of the challenges that we face in Troy is we have a 6-period high school day.
Yeah.
Which is a 6 classes, it's not a lot of classes. And so the prerequisites that have existed in the past required many of our students to take 8 sciences over 4 years in order to be
And
able to
commit
get
early
to
in order to make that
Right.
happen. Right.
So as we've built out these pathways, yes, is the answer. As I'm a student I can move into, you can see those electives
It
that
looks a
pop right
lot more
up.
flexible. That's why I want to know, is it just a pretty drawing or it actually is?
It's
So,
very
okay.
flexible, which also makes it challenging to create pathways
Yeah.
because the pathways are so divergent once you get through those requirements.
Thank you for that. I know there's a lot of hard work, so I just want to call that out. I know it didn't
Yeah,
happen
thank you.
automatically.
And Maria's done a
Really
incredible
exciting.
job.
Okay.
Yeah,
that work too.
if you think about that, it used to be you had to take a year of chemistry, you might not enjoy chemistry at all.
Right,
You
right.
had to take a year, now we've freed up, we're still getting all the standards to the kids, but we have freed up some of that choice.
I just think high school should be where you can explore. And it concerns me if we over track it, so I make a decision in 9th grade and I have to follow this to get to that class I want in senior year. So
And I
this is
think
exciting.
we've been talking a lot about like, if we could describe our work from like the 50,000 foot view of like what is happening in all departments. It's really thinking about with your partnership over the past several years is what is the foundation that we want all kids to have so that they're prepared to launch into whatever choice is next. So that's sort of like the big idea when we think about sort of how it binds all the work together.
As the science department of GDP, it seems like not a building block high school course, it's more an advanced course, and yet it's not AP, and I mean, I know it's kind of sitting in that pathway, but I don't even know if it is needed per se. Have they talked? I don't even know how it came about.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I asked a very similar question about that course because it's unique to Troy.
Yeah.
So it's not a common course, it's across a national high school common course.
And it's very popular.
It's
very
and that's the answer. That's the answer. That's the answer.
It's very
Our
popular.
students love the class, and it embeds a lot of the exposure in order for students to be more successful in AP biology. So you don't need it in order to be successful in AP biology, but it pre-exposes you to quite a few of the concepts and the lab components.
It's got a lab component.
Right.
And there's an example, right, where wasn't that a prerequisite to biology AP, so you were able to eliminate
That was,
You go.
that's a very difficult conversation.
Okay.
So, but
that.
it.
Well, I knew on the other side it was hard for you too, so I didn't know if you were gonna succeed, so, okay.
But it stays because of our student interest, and again, we're committed to a student interest-based schedule, right? So the day we put it out and no students choose to take it is the day we, I think,
It's
revisit
certainly
it.
worth all course. I mean, it's.
Oh, yeah.
And the last
Yeah.
component, is that implemented in the regular biology part, so that?
Yes, all of our bio classes, our bio class is a full science. Okay? Okay, so we're gonna dive a little bit into ELA. So we thought we would just take a minute because in ELA we have a new 9th grade curriculum. So we wanted to provide you with some feedback on where we are with 9th grade before we talk about our next steps. So in 9th grade, this past year, in the spring of 2023 in March, we provided our student and parents with presentations for the class of 2027. So those are the students who are in 9th grade right now. They were provided with these 2 charts that are currently up there, and we shared with them that the chart on the right was our plan for the class of 2027. So entering into 9th grade English and then matriculating into 10th grade English, and then that being the launch pad for then our AP courses and electives that we have. We posted that up on our website. We had some time with you as a board going in to visit our 9th grade curriculum. We had a chance to see that in October. And then in the interim, Natalie and I have had an opportunity to be at both Troy High School and at Athens holding listening sessions. So we had an opportunity to have listening sessions with our principals, assistant principals, our department heads, our curriculum instruction specialists, and then most recently with our current teachers of 9th grade English, 10th grade, 10 honors, 11 AP. So we've had a lot of time with them, and we're going to share some of their thoughts in these next couple slides. We did want to share with you as a board that our current students, so right now, our freshmen who have completed their first semester in English, this is our breakdown of report card data, which we know is grade data can be interpreted in a variety of different ways, but it is a data point. So approximately 90% of our students who are enrolled in our new English 9 course are earning an A, B, or a C. That data is in alignment with our historical grades earned in 9th grade English courses. So this is a grade distribution that looks very similar year over year to what our historical 9th grade English courses have been. So there really hasn't been a change as far as more kids are getting an A, B, or C, or less kids. It's right about the same over the last few years. So we look at that data. We also spent some time looking at and tracking our students who spent last year, so current 10th graders, who spent 9th grade in the new curriculum. So you'll remember we had our 9th grade pilot classes. So at Troy High School, we had 190 9th graders in pilot classes. This year, 154 of those 190 moved from the pilot 9th grade to Honors English 10. So one of the questions or concerns that was brought forward and we talked about was, is this new curriculum going to be able to prepare our students to excel at high levels? So will it challenge our kids who are the most advanced? So what we found is that our students between Troy High School and Athens, approximately 96% of students who participated in the 9th grade pilot last year and matriculated into Honors 10 have earned an A or a B in Honors 10. So our interpretation of that data is...
And the folks that were in the pilot, that was a mix of...
Correct. That was a heterogeneous.
Heterogeneous.
Yeah. So our interpretation of that data is that our students who were in the ungrouped pilot last year receiving the new curriculum are overwhelmingly successful in the current structure of what is a traditional honors class. So if that's a measure of success, that's one measure.
How did they choose to go into honors?
Self-selection.
So they chose themselves?
Correct.
How many of the kids who were in the 9th grade pilot are also in the 10th grade pilot?
So it seems like 81% of kids who were in the pilot 9th grade class self-chose to go into the honors, 10 honors class. Do we have any idea of those 190 and then, subsequently 154, for example, at Taylor High? How many would have been slated to go in that pathway? And if we get
I asked that same question.
So we have no we had no data then coming in when we created the Pilot 9 class, how many of those kids would have been going into 9 honors, regular 9?
So you're really asking, do you have any data that shows you changed their trajectory?
Yes.
No. We don't, we don't right now, doesn't mean.
So we,
I mean,
several years ago, oh, sorry, I don't know if this will help for background, but we talked about kind of removing the very subjective process we were using, which is like teacher recommendation about like who should be in honors. And so like, we discontinued that practice, and so these students chose, like, you know, decided for themselves.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying the 190 students who went into the pilot class coming in from 8th grade to 9th grade, considering that you had additional students who were based on recommendations going into the 9 honors class as opposed to the English 9, I guess I would have expected those 190 would have been graded in some way as the other ones so we can actually see what impact it made. Does that make sense?
So, I understand.
So we
I
had
understand what
students
you're
who
asking.
we did track and who went into English 9, not pilot, but right, English 9 or English honors, English non-honors,
Right.
and then we had this third group of students,
So the students who were in English 9 and English 9 honors last year, who were not in the ungrouped, had the traditional curriculum, they did not have the.
I understand that. I'm saying, so we had a
You're saying
mechanism
where
in
would
place,
they have
we had a
gone?
mechanism in place for teachers to recommend students to go into track A or track B. We created a pilot track C. So did we have incoming data of the students that we put in that pilot group? So we can see going out of the pilot group, if more students actually took honors, how those students are doing, right? So the goal is not just for the kids that would have otherwise been honors 9 students to go into honors 10 and then do really well. The goal is to bring
So
more.
you're asking, of the 154, how many of those kids would not have been allowed to take honors 10 had they stayed on their initial track?
Or how many, yeah, did it or not, yeah.
Well, really, the only data point we would have would be how many of those 154 kids were not previously identifying themselves as 9th grade honors kids. Because we would, right? But the challenge is, I know, like, there really isn't a strong recommendation process in the 9th grade honors. And the students, when they came in and were assigned into a ungrouped class, they were automatically reassigned to an honors title. So all of the students who were in ungrouped were exposed to that high-level curriculum, the high-level new curriculum that's there, and they were all provided an honors credit last year. Because we were mixed, we were involuntarily mixing.
Okay. So, the students that were in 9th grade regular, were they allowed to self-identify in 10th grade to go to honors if they wanted to?
Yes, from
And
last year to this year.
From last year to this year, and did a lot of students do that? Like they jump from regular 9th grade ELA to honors 10th grade ELA. Did they do that?
Students who were not in the pilot.
Yeah, not in the pilot.
I guess
I don't have that data, but we could
But
find
we could find that out.
I mean, my
I don't know what I would do with it, honestly.
That's important.
And if the data is not there for this particular, my expectation going forward, anytime we do something like this, is that we would think, okay, a year, 2, 3 years from now, what is it that we need to show that this is actually having the effect, the intended effect? So what information do we need going in? Because clearly kids were put into English 9, right?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And so, why were those kids put into English 9? Somebody must have determined at some point that that is the level, right? So.
But English 9 is the default, right?
Right.
So nobody asked
So,
for honors, and
I
that's
don't-
why they're in 9.
Are you guys clear? Are you guys clear when she's
Yeah,
asking?
I just don't
I'm
know that we
interpreting-
have, yeah, I just don't know
I'm
that we
interpreting
have
it as
that.
that you're asking for the baseline 8th grade data for the 154 students.
Yes, and if anyone's trajectory has changed.
Correct.
Right, so if they were
That's-
slated for
190
9 and they went to 10H.
Yeah, and then tracking how those kids who would have been slated to be in English 9, once they transferred, of those, how many transferred to honors 10? And once they transferred to honors 10, are they the A, B, or the C? Right? That is, I mean, we're showing data, we're clearly tracking certain things, but that is something that if we're doing a pilot like this, that should be answerable. That's because we've been tracking kids for 15, 20, however many years, so we would have, a year earlier, we would have had recommendations of where kids should have been going. So, I guess my expectation going forward, if we're doing something like this, if we're changing things, that we need to be able to answer these questions 1, 2, 3 years down the line, so we need to gather all of that data up front.
Well, we won't have that data moving forward because there is
This would have been the only year.
I understand.
Right, I'm just naming, right, like, so as we look at this year's
In this
data.
situation.
Right, in this year's data, our 9th grade is, now everyone's in 9th grade,
You just want to longitudinally track these kids, is that what you're
Well,
saying?
there's, I would say, I think especially even the 190 and the 87, like tracking the choices that they make for 11th grade
Yeah,
as
right.
well, and how well those kids end up, you know, how many of those kids wind up doing AP, how well they do, on especially that AP Lang. I mean, the AP Lit's its own beast, but AP Lang is such a practical, foundational course for kids. And as far as like listening data, I even think it would be interesting to interview some of the kids who have been in this to see the way that they talk about themselves as writers after being through these pilots. Because I mean, just my own experience with this, my current 10th grader is anticipating taking AP 11 next year, which I don't think in 8th grade would have ever been something that would have been a viable option.
And that will be, thanks for bringing it up, Nicole, that will be a good data point that we study over the next 3 years as these kids go up. What courses are they selecting? Because one of our goals that we've talked about is, are more kids wanting that access to higher level courses? So what they decide to do will be another point of study.
So just for information, the 10th graders and 11th graders right now have their own personal choice. They're picking honors or not. There's no recommendation whatsoever, and that's only for this year.
There's no, so.
Because for next on, it's just regular, right?
So-
Everybody's in the same.
So the current practice in high school for course selection is conversation with your ELA teacher and then selection. So the sign off, I'm required to have a group is gone, right? So that moved away in 2020. And so that's, so speaking to, they have their free choice, yes, but that's how it works across anywhere we have an option for students to move to an honors learning, it's free choice. So.
But that's going away from the current 9th graders because there is no option.
Right, and we'll talk about that when we talk about 10th grade, yep. Natalie, do you want to talk a little bit about Common List? You want to talk, share another data point?
Yep, so we've been working with our teams actually 6-12, to just get a more standardized tools for measuring. So Common Lit is, it's a computerized assessment, but what our teachers are really, what's resonating with them is that it tells them specifically after a student has taken an assessment, it tells them specifically which standards aren't yet achieved. So the difficulty with it is it's not super helpful right now at this time of year. What it will help us with is at the end of the year, teachers can see, they can see all of the standards, how all of the kids progress. So we will be able to reflect on our curriculum to think about, oh, were we heavy enough on this? Do we need to amp up this? So for individual students, they can get a profile and see like, oh, it can help with like conferring and creating small groups, like, oh, these students all struggled with analysis of literary text. So it's sort of, if you picture the science graphic, a picture of Mrs. Morse, it has a million boxes with like green, yellow, but what is helpful about it is it helps build the capacity of our high school
to those across the year. So it's an important data point from that perspective. That also aligns really closely with the mindset of the curriculum, right? So our curriculum that's been developed for 9 and our curriculum that is in development for 10 focuses on those standards and moves away from the concept of teaching books and into teaching skills and the application of skills through a variety of.
So this is a new assessment, which is a formative assessment we've started this year.
Right, and it's a national, and so we get national data on that as well, so, yeah.
So twice a year assessment.
So I think we're planning on doing it, I think we're doing it 3 times per year. So we gave it, I want to say like September, and then some of our teachers, this is not all of our students, so some of our teachers haven't finished giving it for round 2. The nice thing is it's quick, it just takes 1 class session. They read a variety of passages, answer questions. Again, it's nice with standard alignment. We have tried to emphasize, it's important to look for proficiency, but in the end, we're still prioritizing within our curriculum what you're observing from students while they're reading, what you're observing from students in their writing. So I think there's some good pieces to this that Christine said we can compare ourselves nationally. It gives us really aligned with standards, but we're still really focusing on the really, I don't want to say minute, but kind of like the close up observing the students is really a part of what our work is within the curriculum.
So that 200, 206 is comparative to the 196 that's scaled across the country. So we're smidge above.
Right, so
There are-
90, right. So
What is the range?
I think we dig into the weeds on like, what does the scale score be,
Yeah.
what is it?
No.
But it's a data point we're looking at for our teachers to be able to see student growth, right? So for them, it's where is my student when they come in, based on year-end expectations? How have I moved them over the course of September until January? And then again, how have I moved them again from January until June? So what's called out here, that first column is X, right? That's how many kids
Yeah.
tested, right? So nationally, 98,000 kids tested. And you can see the scaled scores nationally. And then across TSD, so we had, 847 of our 10th graders test. That's our average across the district. And then that last row calls out our 10th grade pilot right now. So those are our students who are currently in 10th grade honors, which is the classes that are piloting the new 10th grade curriculum. So we're studying the new 10th grade curriculum and the students' ability to the students' growth over time using this data point for those specific sections of honors 10th grade with the pilot curriculum. So 187 students who are current 10th graders are in a 10th grade honors class where the new curriculum is being piloted.
Are we also piloting curriculum in non-honors classes?
Yes.
And are they part of that or no?
They're not part of that number.
So what I could read out of this is the difference between the pre-assessment and mid-year, right? The growth.
Correct.
So if you look at it, our standard 10th graders grew 6 points, which is exactly same as the average of the country. But somehow our pilot grew 9 points. So
Can we
they're
get
doing
those
better, kind of, as well.
Yeah, can we pull the numbers of the kids who are not honors but are in the pilot? Because figure your honors kids, you would expect a bigger jump maybe, and so the ones who are in, I would be curious to see the difference.
For sure.
Well, would any of these numbers actually?
Well,
I just jumping around, it doesn't really much to me.
Well, and maybe I would be more interested in the way the teacher's interpreting the data than the actual.
I have no idea, so what is the level of?
But we're not to show what a teacher sees.
Well, I don't need to
That's
see
more
it, but I mean,
helpful.
just
Okay.
like a teacher's, so like if there's the teacher who's teaching the regular 10 with the pilot curriculum, like if they can just like give a narrative of like, I'm excited to see that we're growing, like how it's helpful or what it's doing or like where they're seeing growth.
So I think if this is gonna be the tool by which we're gonna assess the success of our curriculum, we should get a education.
Understanding what the
Yeah.
school means.
Yeah, what is it?
For sure. And then this, the next slide, talks about, with those data points, we know that grades aren't the only data points. We know that knows, this year because it's digital, we may get it sooner. That would be amazing, but previously we've gotten it in August. So we will look at that PSAT 9 data in the summer, as well as continue to measure PSAT 10 and 11. A big piece of our conversations, and we can lean a little more into what we talk about 10, is ensuring that we are preparing our students to be successful in AP Lit and AP Language. And that success is not only measured in grades, it's also in enrollment and a mix of both. Right? We want more students feeling confident going in. We know that there's studies that are out there that show that exposing yourself to an AP level course when you're in high school in and of itself is a really important factor for a student's success in college. But also that outcome piece will be important, so AP scores and grades. And we plan to continue to engage in collecting student feedback, teacher feedback, and parent feedback on what students are experiencing in those classes. And then I think probably one of the most authentic pieces of data that we have that we can also look at in the future is our student writing samples and samples of work, right?
So we'll see that for this year, right? So we'll see.
Yeah, we can definitely share that.
And then, can I ask you for parent-teacher conferences? That's kind of a good check-in for parents at the beginning of the year. What kind of feedback were we getting from parents for the new 9 and anybody who's in the new 10?
Yeah,
Did we get any kind of anecdotal?
We met with both building, like the admin teams were there for our listening sessions, and they shared that they had not heard, they had not had concerns from parents. So I did meet with a parent, and her concern was that she was wanting to make sure that we were really culturally responsive in our book choices and wanting to make sure we had a gamut of titles and that our teachers had the skills at introducing.
Within the curated libraries?
Yes, like introducing and talking about tougher topics, so that was
good feedback.
That was really good feedback, and that grew out of a concern that her daughter had about one of the titles. But that was excellent, feedback from that parent. But both principals and we have shared that they have not had any negative pushback or, people banging on the door.
Question, has the elite department formulated any kind of policy, so it talks about using AI writing samples as part of the writing stuff?
Yes, so they have talked about AI quite a bit, and there was a lot of fear at first when you're reading a relationship thing that something's going to be just written and it'll be really hard to tell. One of the things that I think, just to share that's interesting, that I think from our teachers who've really grown throughout this process is that if you really know your writers and you're with them in the process, they're not going to fake you out. And as you know, we're in a process-based approach for our writing. So students learn every part of the process, and the teacher is involved all along the way. It's not kind of what we all experienced where hand it in, and then now here's your grade. That if you're still teaching that way, it would be much easier for AI to kind of snow you. So they've had those conversations. They also, though, with our partner, I can't remember his name, but it's been partnering with oh my gosh, I can't remember his name. Anyway, they've had lots of conversations about using AI as mentor texts. So how if students are wondering, like, how might someone do this? Like the teacher or student can generate a piece and then say, oh, let's dissect it. And it can give you lots of different iterations. So if we look at it through the lens of potential, I think there's a lot.
This is a conversation that's getting a lot of attention, and in fact, our policy committee is going to look at some draft policies and bring something forward to support leveraging.
I've been using it quite a bit. Honestly, before, right? I use that as a student.
NASB did a workshop that Michigan Virtual did. It was actually, I think it was last week.
Yeah,
it was very good. And kind of the message is, we do our students, we have to have a policy, which but we do our students a disservice if we just say, oh, it's cheating.
Yeah.
Because they have to know how to use these tools. Because everyone, especially using in a professional workforce.
I think that's this process-based curriculum and then the workshop environment really takes it out of
And journal and all.
journal and everything. I mean, I
Yeah.
just think in talking with the students, even it's know, I'm not gonna be replaced by AI, I have a voice, you know, I'm the author, I'm the writer, that's what I want, so.
Well, and you know, some of the evidence that they showed is kind of like, the way they put this is, so if you take, you know, a person with varying abilities, couple them with AI, but with a good process, they will outperform, probably a super smart person with a good machine with no process. Yeah, and there's a really interesting article that, you know, the chess master, like, Kasparov, yeah. So they've been looking at AI playing chess, and they've been piloting a lot of different, and again, different chess players of different levels, using some of the AI programming, but looking at different processes of how the chess players use the AI. They come up with some really interesting results. And again, the conclusion is that, you know, if you couple, you know, a human with the AI with a good process, you're going to get really good results. And it doesn't mean that the AI, you know, kind of takes the place of the human.
Right, right. It's AI
It's
with
another
the
tool.
human.
Yeah. It's another
That's
tool
why
they have to
we're
learn.
all
Yeah.
right, well,
Yeah.
prompting
Yeah.
class lessons.
Yep.
Instead of AI, they're using the term augmented.
Yes. Right, yeah.
I know we talked as a teaching and learning team about that, specifically about, it is here. I can't think of a better way to say it. It is
It's
here.
not going away. This is a calculator, 1990 or 1971,
Right, so,
you know, it's not going away,
so our students are at a disadvantage if we don't prepare them to use it wisely and ethically, and so like, I had a conversation with a teacher who, a student did use it to write a paper, and she knew immediately.
Well, yeah.
But it brings up like, what an important conversation to learn when you're 12 or 13 about ethics and about appropriate use of technology. So those are all important things that we are talking about.
As a district also, there are AI tools that just generate text. There are AI tools that ethically generate text, but also reference
Yes.
where they are using the text from.
Yes.
So we should try and guide our students to use the more ethical, the ones that give credit to the material that they are using.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so this is gonna swing, this graphic then swings us back into looking at where we're going for next year. So again, that right-hand column being what we presented to all of our ninth grade families and our ninth grade students last year. So the intention that we're moving forward with is 10th grade English. So here's our English 10 description. The goal is that we have a full year pilot. So one of the pieces of feedback that we heard last spring, and that you know, I think Naveen has even underscored here today, is we want to make sure that we are measuring the impact of the work that we're doing. And so we want to ensure that next year is really a pilot year for English 10 to be able to collect data aligned to our Common Lit, aligned to PSAT and SAT. We can look at grades as well, but really to spend all of our students enrolled in that 10th grade course and as piloting that. We did have some time to talk with our 10th grade English and 11 AP to reflect on the implementation of 9 and talk about next steps. They were really honest. We met with them last Monday and we went over that flow chart that was on that last chart with them. And they were really honest, and they said, you know, here are some of the things we need. We really need to continue to work on differentiation. We need additional supports on that. And we would like to have some more collaboration time. We need some time to be able to come together as teachers of 10 and talk about how it's going, what we need to adapt. What we know is, especially in the first year of a new curriculum, there's a lot of tweaking that has to happen. And our hope is that that happens annually, but really in that first year, there's a lot. So how do we continue to provide space for them? And you'll see on a slide or two later what we hope to provide. We want to make sure that there's a common understanding of what success looks like. And that's something that we need to be in partnership with our teachers on, because they want to know what is the level that we're looking for, what are the measures you're going to be polling and asking for. this new Common Lit assessment has some of our teachers really nervous because it's a student growth measure that's really useful for a classroom teacher, but they want to know how it's going to be used outside of the classroom and what that's going to look like. So we are very sensitive to that as well. And we heard some reflection from those teachers who are currently teaching 10 about the experience of all the kids who are in their classroom. So who came from a traditional honors 9, who came from the pilot 9, and who came from 9LC, and what are the experiences? And you know, they felt like there wasn't a marked difference in the kids who came from the pilot and the kids who came from honors 9. They were finding equal success, and I think the grade data showed us that too. 96% of the kids getting A's or B's. So this was some of the reflections specifically from them on the 29th. I'm going to talk about the curriculum and the development.
Yeah. So the curriculum team, I actually just visited with them today. So they have 3 of the 6 units totally done, and their goal is to be completely done by July 1, so that they can give the team an opportunity to like really dig in August and see the curriculum in its entirety. Then over the summer, the team that worked on 9 last year will have an opportunity will collect feedback from the teachers at 9 this year and be able to incorporate some of those pieces for revision. Kind of maybe these is our curriculum is a living, evolving thing. And then the last one is what Christine just described. So that idea of all of our students experiencing their curriculum next year. So we have intensive plan of support. So we have 2 more days in spring for our 9th grade team. That is where they have an opportunity for job embedded learning, where they go into the classroom, they see a lesson. Our teachers continue to share that sort of that explicit teaching they've got. What's hard is listening to a student and responding and adjusting based on that. That is, if you think about how we used to instruct, that is the biggest thing is, you know, when most of the teaching was whole group teaching, there isn't a lot of adjusting necessarily on the teacher's part. So that is, Christine called it differentiation, I'll call it being responsive. That is the feedback that we're looking to learn and get better at. We also have days for our curriculum development team to continue meeting. We have our staff developer coming back. For the summer, we'll have our Homegrown Institute. We've opened that up to high school the past 3 years.
Yep.
It's always very well attended by our high school folks. We'll also have an optional, we call it unit unpacking, but basically where they get their curriculum, they have an opportunity before the school year starts to just get a feel for what is in there. And then next year, our plan for support will mimic much of what we've done this year with job embedded learning. Those coaching positions at our high schools have been imperative. Jody and Danielle, their leadership, they've grown so much in their leadership, but also just have been instrumental in helping to support our staff as they take on new practices. So that has been a really important support that we hope to continue. And then our continued partnership with our staff developer team who comes to work with our team.
So how are our 9th grade teachers doing with our coach model and feedback from them now that everybody's doing it?
So I think I'll just speak to, and then Natalie, I know, has had some different conversations. I think one of the pieces of feedback that resonated most with me was from one of our department heads who doesn't teach 9th grade and who teaches in some of our higher grade level, who has watched all of this kind of happen, right? She's watched the teachers work toward it, the changes take place. And what she shared was, you know, first year of implementation is a heavy lift. You're learning something new for the first time, you're implementing it, you're making tweaks along the way. But she did lean into the collective cohesion around 9th grade and how the department felt like it was a good thing to see that there was a strong foundation for all of the students who were coming forward. And so she said that there was a lot of unity around the conversation of what was going on with 9th grade because they could see their colleagues working at it, they could see the results that were coming forward, and they felt cohesive around that decision that had been made. So how are they doing in teaching into it? Their sleeves are rolled up and they're sweating. But it's really
so
hard.
they finished
They've
one
shared that it's
semester,
hard.
so that's why I was
Yeah.
I mean,
the pilot told us last year.
Yeah,
Right.
there's no
It's like, it's
skipping
hard
them.
to
Right.
be
It's
good.
just, yeah.
But the pilot teachers chose on their own, but these
Yeah.
teachers
Right.
are asked to
Right.
do it, so I was wondering how.
It's good that the other half of the equation is still there. It's hard, but it's good, right? That's what you It's no good if it's hard, but it's not good. Okay. So that's good.
All right, so that transitions us to talking about graduation requirements.
So you probably are Oh, don't try to read this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
personal.
just go
Yes.
with whatever changes. there
Yeah,
are.
sorry,
That's-
don't try to read this, it's just to
Yeah.
represent it, that it's in our course description book. So we have a state requirement now to include personal finance for the class of 2028. So our tentative plan is to incorporate, so as shared by the state, they are social studies standards. So our plan currently, because there is overlap with econ in what those standards are, is to incorporate those into econ and AP econ. The one thing that's a little bit different is that it has to be listed as a 0.5 credit. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Right, so if we just talk about those personal finance standards and the rationale for embedding it into econ and AP econ, econ's a required course already. And so if we go back to the reflection on it being a 6-period day, we did not want to add another required course for a student. So it'll be embedded into econ or AP econ. In AP econ, it'll happen at the second semester point for students, kind of after they've cleared the AP college board requirements. They have some flexibility in their schedule, so that's when it'll be embedded. And for the state's purposes, the state now requires that it actually shows on a student's transcripts, which is different than a lot of other graduation requirements from the state. We actually have to list personal finance with a half credit on their transcripts, which is also why we showed that graphic, because it's an added box on our graphic. So just to go back, you'll see it directly underneath social studies. Just want you to know why that's there. So for students, they will get a full credit for econ when they take it. But this won't change until junior year for 2028. So that's next year is their 9th grade year, then their 10th grade year, then their 11th grade year. So we've got 2 years to make this change in econ, because econ is an 11th grade course.
So we have a team kind of studying that right now.
Right.
Well, my understanding from the one from Michigan Merit was that 6 out of 7 of the standards in personal finance were already covered.
Yes.
So it was really just one, her recommendation was add one more standard to your econ class and call it a day.
That's exactly what we plan to do.
It's not a heavy lift.
It's not a heavy lift. But what it does is it starts to play into the conversation that I know we're eager to have on the flexibility of our graduation requirements.
I thought you were saying adding another half credit requirement.
Yeah, no, not that.
Separate.
But, so just for purposes of your understanding, our econ course will grant 1 credit for students. It will be half a credit in econ and half a credit in personal finance for taking econ for 1 semester. It will only count toward their GPA for half a credit. So you won't get a double hit for, so let's say you did terribly in econ. It won't count as 2 semesterized classes, it will count as 1 semesterized class, and then you'll get the credit for personal finance. So you won't actually be getting a grade in personal finance, you'll be getting a credit.
Kind of like a PE, you don't get a grade, but you get a grade.
You get a grade. But you can get a credit in PE if you take a varsity sport.
Sports, yeah, that's what my kids
That's
are getting.
That's just for the elective though.
Right.
That's just for the PE elective, you're still required to take
Half.
phys ed.
Yes.
No, not health, phys ed.
And health, they're separate,
Yeah.
but I know that we ideally have kids taking econ in 11th grade, but spending time around high schoolers, I know they don't all follow the exact prescribed stuff. So, one, like, will we make sure that it's ready for kids who are trying to take it in 10th grade? And then 2, what will this mean for kids who take econ over the summer?
So those are great questions, and our hope is to have, and that's where it's not a heavy lift just to embed it into econ, but we have to build out all the what-ifs. So that in time for those students to be 10th graders, we have the flow chart of if you don't do it here, you do it here.
Okay. And then kids who, for the summer, it's realized they're gonna have to pick up a personal finance, so that might not be. Might not be the shortcut they thought it was.
Maybe because they're in some course,
So for kids. So Edgenuity doesn't, when they take it through Edgenuity, right, in summer,
Edgenuity is our summer school
Yeah,
program,
that
but
is
we
what
also
it is.
have Pearson and
I was gonna say it's Pearson.
It depends, there's two different ways to take it. So the Troy high school summer school courses are offered through Edgenuity. But there's also Pearson that you can take it through Intersect or Aspire, or you can take it through Michigan Virtual. So there's
We don't need
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we'll have to figure all those pieces out. Make sure it's embedded.
That's your.
Yes.
So my question is.
We'll keep moving here.
Because this is just a Michigan requirement, and, you know, our kids may be applying to colleges out of state, will their transcripts say, you know, so it will, how does that look on their college transcripts?
It
Is
would
there
look
good-
just like so it would just say, personal finance, 0.5 G.
But it'll say econ as well?
No, it'll say econ with a grade.
So like econ.
So your econ class will still have ABC, whatever you were.
So it'll also think they tested out of percent finance. It'll be the same ways that they took the test to test.
So you're not really
Sure,
taking
that's how-
any of the credits away from econ, you're not making it look like they took less econ?
No, because
They'll still get the full credit.
they're actually getting an extra half credit.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the change.
So instead of 18 required graduation credits for Michigan Merit, it's 18
Now
and a
it'll be
half.
18. That's where I thought you were going. You're eager to add another half credit. required.
How is IA handling this?
I don't know the
Is it
answer to that.
Michigan?
I'll find out.
Okay.
Are we the only state that did this?
I don't think so, because Dave Ramsey has a curriculum. And so I think other states, I'm sure he's not doing it just for Michigan.
I'm guessing it'll be in some form of their social studies classes, just because they map, because they have to map through IB anyway, so it would be something that they map out.
There's been national champions, so it's probably champions.
So I know one of the questions that's come from the board, and I think is a different conversation, because I think it needs different spaces, to really talk about flexibility and graduation requirements in sum total. This slide is a lean at the flexibility that already exists. We had a very lengthy board conversation in the last couple of years about TCCHS and the amount of flexibility we provide there. We've created and provide some opportunities for flexibility around fourth year math at Troy High School and at Athens. Our CTE programs actually count for a variety of graduation requirements at both of our high schools, so whether that be math that's embedded or whether that be applied art that's embedded in those CTE programs. So Natalie and I are committed to learning and collaborating around some fuller flexibility for what that looks like for our graduation requirements. I think that's a full kind of study for us to do together and share with you, because that does require us to change some of our philosophical thinking, maybe that we've done in the past, about what does flexibility look like and how do we internalize that as an organization. So I just wanted to move that forward.
And I think to the earlier question, what does it look like on a transcript? Like, I
Yes.
think that is a real question.
Yeah.
You're talking about using things in multiple capacities. What does the transcript look like in a GPA on it?
Right, if you do a cross-disciplinary, project-based semester, how does that translate into transcript? Right? That traditional skill of understanding.
So a couple of resources for families that we think are important to just name. Our teaching and learning website continues to be a good hub for the work that's going on. For learning more about courses and learning more about the work that's happening. We are planning, Natalie and I are planning to work with our high schools to offer a 10th grade parent night for any questions for 10th grade parents. We in the past have had 9th grade parent nights that are obviously very well attended because they're brand new, but we haven't had them so much as they transition under other grades. So that's something that we are looking to host this spring. And then also, I think something that's exciting to share, our two high schools are working on shared course, we are calling them course promotional materials as we get ready for scheduling. So they're going to have a common slide deck for all of English across Troy High and Athens that they share with students and then that we share with parents. So that when we're talking about what do English electives look like, the language is common that's there. And they're working together to do that.
We
So
got feedback that kids don't like reading the course description.
So we decided to put on slide. You know, the other piece of feedback we got that I think is important is some of our other teams. So during that week of scheduling at the high school, if I'm a student and I am in English, math, social studies, science, band and PE, I don't have any elective teacher to talk to me about all of those other electives. And so some of those other teachers have said, how do I even begin introducing those concepts? So this slide deck is a great way for a teacher to be able to say, we're gonna spend 30 minutes today, we're gonna look at all of these options that are available for 10th graders, and I can help you answer some of those questions. So it's a great resource.
Can I ask you, and it may make your head explode, which is, when is scheduling required to be turned in for 10th grade, for incoming 10th graders? And 9th graders.
So 9th graders actually go later than the rest of our students. So our course description book formalized approval is at the 27th board meeting. So that's when this stuff goes through that we just talked about. So our assumption is that on the 28th, because it's digital, right, on the 28th we make it live. So we make the adaptations, we make it live on the 28th. And they're actually going to start talking with 10th through 12th graders on the 28th and 29th of February. And then they will spend the time, so they'll look at it.
There's no way to do a parent night before that. It feels funny to have the parent night after the schedule is already done.
So I think we have a window that goes through the 12th for students to be able to select courses, and then also there's ways to change or give feedback. So what we can do is look at scheduling that first week of March, apparently. I think that's a feasible opportunity for us, and that's before the deadline, right? So it's when the kids have the
That's one thing I
materials.
think, like a parent night is,
I agree.
trying to decide which course I'm gonna have them sign up for.
Yeah, I
But
think having those, and especially before 9th grade and 10th grade, I think by the time of your 11th,
You're okay.
you're already on a kind of path and you know you like.
No, and I was thinking you might not be able to do it this year, but.
So then really it's 10th grade where they start to go,
Yeah.
oh, I liked this, or I want to do this. So, because they get a lot of things out of the way as freshmen. So it's an important.
So we'll roll right in, end of February, beginning of March. And then 9th graders go after that, and they go down to the middle schools.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other questions for these two?
But there is like a parent night for incoming 9th.
Oh, that's still,
Yes,
yeah, that
yes.
still happens, yeah.
Right around March 20th, it's that week, for Wilshire High School.
How many classes do we have where kids go back and forth between the two?
We run a shuttle every hour.
I know where.
How many classes are served by those students? I can find out.
I just, like, when we talk about, I mean, this is probably a conversation for a different day, but when we talk about class size and cost effectiveness and, you know, what we're offering in electives and all of those pieces. Yeah, I've got some wonderings.
I think that the method that we use when we dig into the schedule for the two high schools is really student-driven with a class minimum and maximum. And if we don't hit those thresholds, that's when we question whether they run or not. And then that's when we also look across buildings to see if we can cohort kids in one spot or another.
Yeah, I know that, like, so Cassandra has taken classes at Troy High both last year and this year. And last year her classes lined up with lunch. And so, like, there was minimal class absence, different things like that. The class that she has this year, I have her driving herself because the shuttle, I mean, she misses so much class time. I'm like, it's stupid. Like, anyway, so it's incredibly disruptive, and I'm not sure that it's productive. And so, when I think about that kind of stuff, like, if we're talking about deep learning, if we're talking, like, we have all these priorities, like, as much as the class that she's taking at Troy High is a really cool curriculum, is it the right thing? Is it too hard? Is it the right thing? Cost effective, you know, and there's actually more Athens kids in it than Troy High kids, but it's offered at Troy High. And then, like, I'm like, anyway, and it's, because it's 6 hours, they have a way, it's and so like it's, yeah, and so I'm like, is there, if we're gonna do these classes, is there a way to condense them all so that we can.
First half of the day, or.
Yeah, so we can limit shuttle runs, like what are, and I know this, I'm not trying to pretend that this is like a easy, like, oh, it's just do this 2 things and switch these things. I realize it's really complicated, but when I'm thinking about, like, what are the, it's kind of cost benefit analysis.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
You want to sit over there, or you want to sit here? Just stay right here. I knew I was gonna say, you look like you're big.
So, at our current pace, we have about 8 more hours.
Well, no. I don't do any, all I wanted to ask on the business services is, everybody's had a chance to review them. They were all very straightforward. Are there any specific questions for each rep? If there aren't, I think we can move forward to the meeting.
I just have a question.
Okay, yes.
I looked at the
Which item?
big ticket item of temporary fencing, $96,000 for something that is going to go away in a few months. Are there any alternatives? That seems like a huge ticket item for a temporary fencing.
Rob, come on.
Sorry.
I can tell, I mean, the
I thought it was.
I would say it's about, well, here from the expert, but I think it's cost of doing business. Because it's safety and security.
Yeah.
But who
I
says
want
you're
to-
gonna throw it away?
That's my question. What are we doing with the fencing?
The
Do
temp-
they take it back? or-
Yes, so the temp fencing, the way that came about, and the reason it wasn't in the original package of the renovations, is when we started sitting down and speaking to the contractors and looking at schedule, especially with all the different projects that we had and what we needed to get done and what our goal was, both Ramo, Tim Fulcher, and Shane, we proposed an idea of what if we started work in February? What if we started work in March? And could we pull forward some of that instead of waiting until June 17th? And the answer was yes, we could. And there was the benefit of, so the benefit of pulling the work early is we have 2 synthetic turf ball fields and we have 2 that are going to be natural grass. The natural grass have to be seeded, and typically we're going to go through 2 seasons of 2 growth seasons before you can actually play on it. So by pulling that forward, we would be able to basically potentially get 2 growth seasons in this year. But to do that safely, to be able to have construction activity going on at the Troy High site, while spring sports eventually are going to kick up, we would need temp fencing. So that is why it wasn't part of the original, because we didn't intend on starting. But what we're seeing is 2 things. Is one, we're seeing lead times and labor an issue, and everybody trying to get work done in June, July, August. Not just schools, but county, state, everybody's doing that. So that's really where that came from. So it is temp fencing. It is get put in, it does get taken out, it doesn't get thrown away, but we're not buying it.
So it's their labor of bringing it in, putting it up, and
Yeah.
taking it
And
back.
it's pretty expensive. If you think about Troy High where the retention pond is, which is along Northfield Parkway there, our main utilities are gonna go to there. So all of our drainage, again, so that we don't overwhelm the city system, has to be able to be retained. We're gonna expand that a little bit, and we're gonna take utilities to it. So you look at that coming all the way around the south end of the stadium, up near the ball fields where the varsity and the JV softball, JV baseball, and varsity baseball are now. That whole area is gonna get fenced in, so that we can safely, again, have equipment doing there. So, it is the cost of doing business. It'll also, obviously decrease our overall timeline, and 3, it'll allow us to get, what we're targeting is to get 2 growth seasons in this year. So if we get certain areas done, we can actually get some seed down, get growing in some of those areas this year in spring, late spring, and then also another seeding get down in September.
So
which
that's
would
the
be our fall.
JV fields, because the varsity fields are all turf.
Correct.
So
As well as
it's
there's.
only one field then.
Well, but it's also the ancillary areas that we have to go through to get to there, yeah. So
it's one field and then some.
Baseball and softball.
Yeah.
So there's 2 fields.
Yeah, it'll be 4 total, 2 natural, 2 synthetic.
2 synthetics,
Yeah.
okay, 2.
Yeah. So that is why though. I mean, that is truly the why.
Yeah, it's the ticket item looked big, that's all.
Anything else across
So
C
there-
through F?
There wasn't an attachment.
Yeah, for
F.
So, correct, I was gonna mention that district-wide lawn
Oh.
mowing. Rob is in the process of getting quotes. This is a service, so there's no bid requirement, but we do solicit bids. We're waiting on one others. So we will finalize a recommendation between now and the board meeting.
Who currently does our lawn mowing?
No, the bulk lawn mowing has been contracted out, and the company that
But it's
expired
not,
last.
we're not doing it within district currently.
No.
No,
Okay,
no,
that
it's
was
not.
right, that was my
No, it's been contracted out to a bulk mowing contractor for, I think we're going on about 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
And the
Okay.
the increase would be, I assume, just equivalent to the rate of inflation kind of thing, or we don't know?
We don't know yet, we'll see it at the meeting.
So we'll get it to you as soon as we have it.
Okay.
Yeah, we had our all the lawn mowing companies, you know, kind of ebb and flow with the snow and salt, and it was been really, really quiet, and then all of a sudden we got all that, you know, up, down, and so, we're actually getting the quotes in now. I got my third one today.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Was there something for the section one? I know we did the work.
The section one is essentially the same resolution we did last year. It's really just a courtesy back to the county to show that we updated, because we actually could have submitted last year's, the discount is within the parameters of the previous resolution. But when I asked them, the county said it'd be really nice if we had something with the 2024 data. So I said, okay, we'll just renew.
We'll renew it. We'll look at, see if there's more affirming language or whatever. I'll work with Dana Abrams
To make it look sweet, with the red bow on the top and.
to finalize that, and, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are technically still in purchase
Well, that's
agreement
what I
with
was
6
gonna
Rivers
I was
right
gonna say, I
now,
thought
so.
the
Yeah,
write-up
yeah,
for the-
drainage is what we're
Yeah.
So,
So I was saying, we can probably just, like, for that update, we can throw it in the consent
so
agenda.
consent for A, and you get, for this work, we're gonna, what is that, regular?
Yeah.
Okay, so A.
Yeah, anything that's bond work, we should have.
Okay.
Okay, schools of choice.
What about that?
The lawn mowing.
How are we paying for that?
We'll pay for that, general fund.
You can throw that into consent. I just think anything that we,
Well,
anything that's
Yeah.
bond dollars should
Bond
be,
receiving funds.
yeah, it should be,
Okay.
you got it.
Schools of choice, our annual recommendation, and Chris and Christine are prepared to help out if they need to. But I think it's pretty straightforward. We know what schools of choice does. It provides us non-resident students with additional enrollment opportunities, and participation is optional. It's an optional program. It's a policy lever, basically, the board has. And it's the extent of which we use it is up to the local level, or local districts. Here's our enrollment projections. Most likely, 24-25, again, we use Plant Moran Cressa for their state-approved demographers, and they provide us our projections. You can see at our kindergarten and first grade, why we show kindergarten and first grade is because we've been targeted schools of choice for those, and that's where the history slides come from as well. So we look at 809 kindergarten next year, and then 729. Of that 809, 77 are pre-K, projected pre-K students. Here's the history. You can see the
Yeah, I was wondering, I was looking at this slide, and the last 2 years, the projections were quite off from the actual. I mean, 21, 22, I understand because of COVID, we are down, but the other 2 years, we were quite off. Do you think that they had updated their projections to be more accurate, or we should expect a certain, like a 30, 40 off? Mostly?
So, Nicole, you were gonna say something I think that probably aligns with.
I'll let you talk. You're there.
So the pre-K numbers have convoluted the projections over the last few years. We started, and our program has become more robust, and the way we've accounted for them has been a little bit different. So the projections have been modified a little bit in order to accommodate those.
Okay.
And then the actual numbers include them. But it's something we do have to dig into a little bit. Chris, do you have anything else to add toward that? Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna just ask what Chris's thoughts are on the budget, trying to do 4K preschool for all. Like, how do we think that's gonna impact these numbers, if that actually goes through?
But remember these projections, so we're excited to see that the uptick in numbers of our pre-K students are impacting our kindergarten numbers, and that we have about 390 students that are coming to our kindergarten, so we're capturing more students. We have like 600 total now, I'm estimating, of course, but in our preschool. So as those numbers expand over time, we went from 200 preschoolers to 600 preschoolers. So we look forward to filling our buildings, but it hasn't impacted. We're projected to be, great to be down, and so that's helpful right now because it is from a building utilization standpoint, because we're able to backfill those sections with, like Hill, for example, has 2 GSRPs now, and that sort of thing. So while our numbers go down, our buildings are filling up with the preschool numbers. That's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's what I'm just wondering, if, like, as we think about school of choice, if 4-year-old preschool is now in our purview of regular budget, like, what do we, I just wonder what we think that means. I don't even have a.
It's not, so I don't know that would, that's
It's
not
not,
under that umbrella yet at all, so it's not really, that's not how it really enters our.
Yeah, in the preview of the budget, of course, it's an executive priority to expand offerings. And there's going to be some additional budget to it. And we have, as Chris said, we've captured more kids. We've increased our capacity to service our 4-year-old and 5-year-olds. And we still have space to do that. So we're going to continue to look at that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, anything the state puts in, they're gonna have to phase it in over time anyway, because most districts don't have the capacity to take the kids even if they offered it, so whatever happens won't affect this year.
And overall, as it affects our K-12 programming, there are still less kindergarten kids coming in. The birth rates are still down, so there are still less kindergarten kids, so our cohort groups are
Still small.
Are
Still smaller.
But ironically, our preschool numbers continue to double.
Correct.
That's the one area we're growing like crazy.
But to answer your original question, I can tell you in my 13 years on the board, we've had 3 different methods for forecasting, and we're always, we can be plus or minus 100.
Oh,
It's like, it just
so
isn't
it's
that
not
precise of a
expected.
science, you know? These guys have been usually within 50, they've been pretty close. Dr. Strangelove, or what was his name? Yeah, so I remember my nickname for him when I was at.
From a percentage standpoint, they're.
And Vandenberg before him, I mean, it's like we had,
Okay.
yeah.
So
it's data.
That's the projections. Here's the.
I'm haunted.
Here's the history of applications, and there's been an intentional policy move to draw down the number of applications that we have received. And you can see, we had some good dialogue yesterday regarding this. Our cohort groups are actually moving their way through the organization, and they're in our middle schools and high schools now. So as we graduate our 12th grade cohorts, they're about 200 to 250 larger than our kindergarten cohort. So when we talk about enrollment projections, that plays in effect. So the recommendation for the last couple of years has been that we just look at sibling choice. So that's where the recommendations are coming from. This gives more historic data of where our schools of choice students are situated as it relates to our elementary schools, and then district-wide by grade level. So those are just 2 graphics. This is also additional data that provide some more ethnicity and subgroup data.
Just whatever Mark got excited about when he built it.
Yeah. Looking at other non-schools of choice numbers,
There's
so.
just another way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to our recommendation. You know, we work closely with our pupil accounting department. They do a survey, they send out a survey, so we try to understand what our schools or what our sibling choice preference is going to be, and we believe 11 kindergarten students, 1 first grade student, and 7 middle schools would be sufficient to meet those obligations. The board has,
So we are obligated to do this, we are obligated to open it up and say this is what we're gonna do for open enrollment, right?
it's our recommendation that we at least service the siblings.
We're not obligated, we're
Siblings.
not obligated.
We are not
We're
obligated,
just-
but it would be a.
But
No, no.
if we, I know what you're asking, if we say 19, we have to provide 19
Correct.
Yeah, so I
Yes.
guess my question is this, one, we have to say this is what we're gonna accept for open enrollment, but do we need to
Schools of
advertise?
choice.
Oh,
Schools of
but, yeah,
choice.
schools of choice, yeah, okay, the words are incorrect,
Yeah,
correct.
and they're
So-
important.
Yes, I agree. So does this give, my question is more, does this give false impression to the public to say we have 11 spots open in kindergarten, while in fact we don't have any because all of them are going to be allocated to siblings of our students?
There's no
So-
other way to advertise.
There's no, yeah.
So
And
we
I
don't
think
even
we're-
put
no.
anything, so
No,
how?
we do, we are required to,
required
but there's
to.
no other way to advertise it. We don't say like, this is only for siblings, and oftentimes we establish that waiting list if these people were to move or drop out, and we kind of work that list over time.
Okay.
And then, this still allows you though, in August, if you look and you say for strategic,
Yep.
for setting class sizes and opening sections, we still have an ability for you to open more slots if you need to.
Exactly, there's another window we've
Yeah.
often utilized, and we'll open 10 more spots, or, you know, then
Right,
that's.
and we don't
what
need to give you
always
approval of
waiting
that,
list.
correct?
So-
That's, okay.
So if we don't advertise it, and if you go back to a few slides back, and there's 150 applications for 7 spots, where are they coming from then? If they don't, do they not know that we have reserved them only for the siblings and we do not really take anyone else?
They're just putting their name in a hat.
They're put, yeah, they know it's a
A
lottery.
lottery and a, yeah.
We're a destination.
Okay, so the
They wanna be there.
107 who have applied
Yeah.
for 27 spots, even though they know that the
Yeah.
27 are spoken for.
Well, as Chris mentioned, the
Yeah.
things happen with those sibling preferences as well, and
Mhm.
therefore we establish a wait list. And there's opportunities, so we do the lottery
So
and make
slim,
sure.
yeah.
Right, it's a slim chance, but.
Okay.
And we do in August, we've opened up slots in August
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
we're looking, you know, like if Chris is looking at a section of 16 kindergartners, and it's like, let's add 4, and we can add a new section to that school. She'll open it up for 4, we'll pull them out of the waiting list, you know, and they all get a random number assigned to them, so they know where they're at in the lottery, so.
Okay.
They kind of know it's, you know, it's a low
So
probability
they know
of getting
that
in.
when they come and
Yeah.
give us the application, they know that they have very slim chance of getting in.
I would say, I mean, yes.
We just
the
say,
lottery
thank you
system.
for your
Yeah.
application, I
Yeah,
think is what we
exactly.
say.
There's 11 spots, you might get one, that's it.
Yeah.
That's all we say,
Yeah.
okay, I see, okay, thank you.
I mean, I think they're gonna know if we're advertising 19 slots altogether, or, you know,
Right.
that their chances are pretty slim,
Okay.
so.
Okay, so that would be the recommendation, evaluate it again in August. The board certainly has
Is that-
authority to increase.
Later.
Are we comfortable with that recommendation and move forward for the,
Sure.
everybody's good?
Yeah.
We're good.
I mean, we did the same thing last year.
Yeah, yeah,
Not the same number, but
Yes.
yeah. Okay, good. And the last thing,
I think it's different.
yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
Okay, and then the last thing we have is MASB Board of Directors elections, and that's Birgit. And then anybody else, I didn't even look, but I.
It's two
So
other people, but
tomorrow
I
is
feel
the,
real.
tomorrow is the candidate forum, I plan on going. OCSBA is doing the candidate forum, I'm gonna listen.
Right. I feel that Birgit's been really good at her job, she's been really
Yeah.
engaged, and I don't see any reason to, she wants to
to profiles, and I think Berlin is really the best call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like Berger.
We have to vote on it, and we can decide on the voting.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
by that time, we can decide.
And you can tell us if you were really impressed by.
Yeah,
it.
I said that.
Like you, I read them and I was like, no.
Yeah.
Oh, here.
One is that one woman was, I did
Orange.
this, I did that, I did this.
Oh,
and
right.
that. She was
That's not nice,
understanding
no.
the 35 words.
Right here.
I didn't see the lead at all.
Okay, so we'll bring that forward. And
Most
then-
99%.
And then we'll have, I think the way we have to, someone has to nominate her, I think, and then
And she's deeply involved in Oakland County Schools.
she's very,
This is home.
yeah.
Well, and she's, I mean, when you read the email she sent, all the things that, responsibilities that she's been willing to take on, I think are.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, other. Is there anything else that you have?
No, just to realize the governor does plan to release her budget this year, or this week, so we should know a little bit about where we're starting. That will inform our work as we.
Doesn't matter. Okay, with that. Well, it might matter, yeah.
It will matter.
Actually, it will matter now
No,
that
it
the
will
Debs are in
matter.
control,
Yeah.
it will matter, so, okay.
So, that's the, I think that's the only thing we have right now.
And now we have Christiana appropriations, so I'll be able to give us blow by blow as that comes in the Senate, so, okay.
I'm good, Frank.
Of course, I have something. So I did wanna, the calendar for the next school year, it's Tuesday, and I've already received 2 questions from parents if we have the calendar yet, so, I understand that it hasn't been finalized. My question would be, I think for a lot of parents, it's maybe summer planning, so I don't know if there's anything that we know what the start date might be and not the full calendar. But like I say, it's Tuesday and I've been asked by 2 parents already this week, so, and I'm sure you guys get emails as well, so.
No, I mean, it's an annual frustration, and we understand that this year it's unique because we're in a collective bargaining year, so we don't have the answers. You know, it's safe to say, towards the end of August and the first couple weeks of June, there'll be 180 days of school. So, you know, with the holiday break in there in December and, you know, so but it's not lost on us, and we know that there's angst around it, and Kendra probably bears the brunt of most of that. We know that it's a priority of ours as we continue to
The
have
only
this
thing
discussion.
I would say is if at any point there's anything that can be shared, even if it's school will start before Labor Day or after Labor Day, just so people can,
As
because a
soon
lot of
as
my parents
there's a
do.
TA, or as soon as there's something to share, we will share it.
Yeah, because a lot of people do travel overseas, so I think they're just trying to figure out when they need to come back.
But from a governance standpoint, I do think it's appropriate for you guys to educate the people that it's a negotiated contract.
Oh, I do, I said that it's currently under negotiation
It's
between the,
negotiation,
yeah, no,
yes.
I do that. And then the other thing is a comment, you know, we talked a lot about, we're doing all this belonging work for the next 3 years, and so I do want, you know, the administration and the people who are on both the calendar team, the calendar is a really big part towards belonging, so if we're gonna take belonging seriously, we also have to take the school calendar very seriously and how reflective it is for our communities. I'll leave it at the calendar too.
The National School Board Conference came and went. Matt did a very good, yeoman's job.
Did you get IDA funding?
Funded.
Because if not, I don't know.
Matt,
What a great job you did.
13% that we're stuck at, he got a commitment for 40%.
That's what I'm waiting for.
I'm waiting.
I know.
Matt,
Out of your new salary.
as a new trustee, you would have thought Matt had been there for 5 and 10 years, the way he was an integral part, asked questions. We all got these handouts, I'm gonna give it to Rick too, so they can get on communique, everybody can share it. These are the talking points. These are the priorities for funding. We have to get off of 13% when we're promised 40 for the last, 15 years at least. But it's not a one and done operation, as you know, Carl. We have to keep the feet to the fire for our representatives to pass this important legislation, to bring forward IDEA and the funding to where it should be. Every year that the costs go up and we're still stuck here, as you know, we're in the hole. So
Anybody ask John James if he voted yes?
that was a private.
He had a private meeting.
He had private.
Private meeting. That's because last year he promised he would support it and then he didn't.
Yeah,
So,
promises
yeah.
made, promises not kept.
Right, exactly.
I did think that they said that most, if not all, of Southeast Michigan reps, Republican and Democrat, are on board with the legislation that they have currently. That's not fully funding, but steps
It's
to
better.
fully fund eventually. So I don't know if they'll go anywhere, but we have a big contingent at least in Southeast.
I know that last year there's an appetite to release Senate to make sure it increased at the rate of inflation.
But it's
So I don't
very,
know if they actually.
it is important for each of us trustees and all the trustees in all the school districts to keep the flame alive, to keep the emails and the letters to our reps, don't forget us, don't forget us, don't forget us. And what I came back with is if it's a Democrat, if it's a Republican, they're so divided in Congress right now that one side does not reach over the aisle to support. And with other priorities that are going on in this country, it just keeps getting pushed back to the back. But if we keep their feet to the fire and as trustees, our responsibility is to have them stay focused for our students, to write letters. And I don't know, I'm sure you did too. I'm going to be writing a letter to thank you to Haley Stevens and to Debbie Stabenow. And thanks for your commitment. Thank you for appearing and showing that commitment to our district as well as Oakland County and the state of Michigan. Michigan had the largest contingent in Washington, and our voices, I'm sure, were heard. And Matt, again, did a tremendous job as a rookie. You would think he had this thing wrapped up. Matt did, no, in all honesty, Matt did a great job. I was very proud of him.
He's credit for his
It's
job.
Mrs. Lockman show?
Yes.
She did, she made a quick speech for us.
Yes.
She's very strategic. She actually gave us points last year about how to try to.
Exactly.
extend
So
to the rest of the state.
in all, it was a good investment, but let's see how it translates into at least action to be on the House floor and hear it in the State of the Union that says, okay, it's just not all Ukraine and Israel, it's our students as well. We are the priority, we are the future in public education to get that IDEA going and move it along to a higher level.
Can I ask you guys a question? Is the Tri-County Alliance still active?
Mm-hmm.
I must have bounced off their email list.
I'm not a readout.
You're talking about the K-12 Alliance, right?
Yeah. It was
Mhm.
called
Oh,
the
right, yeah,
It's
now
called
it's
the
kind
K-12
now it's
Alliance.
K-12, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to get, like requests.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Rich is on
Rich is
the
on
board,
the
but
board.
yeah, I'm not on that email list either.
I used to be. I mean, they would always give you an alert of, they made it very easy.
Yeah, I used to be too.
If
But you're
I-
right, I haven't seen anything.
K-12 was the one that set up the meetings with
Yeah.
So they were the ones that put together the talking.
If I get any email or directive, I always shoot it to Judy or to Carl so that it can be broadcast to all
Yeah,
of
but
us.
they used to be very active. I mean, you'd get emails real regularly and
Exactly.
that would give you, here's an issue, this is going before, was both federal and state. And so it was always, very, timely.
Yeah.
And now that I think about it, I haven't seen an email.
Yeah, until you said that, I didn't think of it, but I haven't.
I'll talk to Rich to see if there was an intentional purge of who they were.
Gadflies.
Of who they were, because that's a
Nice.
But I'll see what.
I've never had an email from Cape Coral Alliance, but the last advocacy conference a year ago, it was Cape Coral Alliance that set up the meetings with all the elected officials.
So it used to be called Tri-County Alliance.
Yeah, they did, and then they changed it, yeah, they did.
Is it a statewide alliance?
No.
They expanded the membership.
Expanded.
They did expand the membership. Did
It's
you have
not-
anything else?
No, I don't have.
Last night I went to Troy High's Got Talent to support their activist week, and then next week they'll do charity week, but just, it's so, exciting to see the way the kids really get behind, supporting other people, and I love the team building that you see at all of these events.
And you saw a kid play a trombone with his feet.
I did see, yes, I saw. a
That was
kid-
the text I got last night.
He actually did a fine job playing his trombone with his foot, yeah, so,
I'm impressed.
but it, because really it's just the slide.
Yeah, I know, I was gonna
It's
say,
all your
but
mouth.
the- I'm
Like,
surprised you
And he didn't play very long. Like, it
zing the
was-
slide into the
It
crowd.
was a very short piece. But anyway, I just, I do wanna, it means a lot to the students when board members show up to this stuff, so if you can make it out to something, it's always fun to see how much enthusiasm and team building happens in those environments, and we see a lot of the, academic stuff or the other things, but it's fun to kind of see the
wackiness.
belonging.
Yeah.
It's sheer wackiness, I mean, it really is, yeah, so, anyway, if people have room in their margin in their schedule, it can be entertaining to go see.
Okay.
So the only thing for me is, we had the business education roundtable meeting last week, well attended. Any of you, and Rich kind of went through in the communique, kind of the Career Accelerator program and the new business council and such they're sending off. Got some good feedback on how to configure that business council. But if any of you guys know companies or have your own companies that want to take a student intern, Kendra can give you all the details.
How many more do we need at this point?
I think we're looking at like 3 more companies.
That was what Rich told me, so you're getting close, okay.
Yeah.
I think you information from mine too, so maybe we had to two.
And you actually want a few more companies, right?
Yes.
We would love more, just because, right, then it takes the burden off a few others that were kind of like, oh, take 2, take 3, right?
Okay.
So,
Yeah, they're really trying to push multiple students, so, yeah.
and it helps for next year, too. The kids are so excited,
Okay.
So, and even if in your own networking.
They'll be so disappointed in them because that'd be so bored. In my office, they'll cry, okay. Okay, good. Anything else?
No,
Okay, good. How about for you, Alice?
No, I'm just
Oh,
ready,
okay.
to report back. No, I don't have
Anything else? Okay. The book, we'll break it up into chunks. It's really just, it's very readable, don't worry about it. It's actually really interesting. And he references a number of books that we have read as a team, so over the past couple of years. But it's probably the first half of the book. It has probably the most application for us, but my guess is probably when you start reading it, you'll probably finish it. Just he's a good storyteller. So, but what I was thinking was just little chunks over the next couple months. So I'll look at it, and now that everybody has the book, I'll give you an assignment for next month. And I thought we'll just go for like 15 minutes a meeting, and I think you'll like it. He's a really good storyteller. So. And then I don't have. Oh, the only question, something you had asked me, and do you know? You may not know. Why did we end up with Activist Week and Charity Week on the same weeks this year? We were kind of surprised that. Does anybody know why?
They're not
though,
because
they're not.
they're technically separate, but they're not separate because they both have events that bleed over into the other one.
Dining nights are currently bleeding over, but we will address that for future years. So, but their weeks are designated separately. So this
Okay.
week's is Troy High's, next week's is Athens, they put some of their additional fundraising that kind of spilled over just by pure intent of raising money and
Right,
being able to
right.
be out there. and
I didn't know if it was a
no-
conscious
no
decision to
malintents
get them
and no-
together,
no.
you know, or what,
Right.
you know.
So we talked even most recently as yesterday about just having like a Sunday to Sunday or a Saturday to Saturday kind of break point, so
Yeah.
that one
Well-
starts and the other one.
Just
Well,
'cause
and that's,
they-
I think it would be helpful for the community if they could have a couple of weeks in between them, because it's,
Both places are asking for money.
they're both asking for money. I mean, it's kind,
Support.
it's a little bit burdensome for people, and even for.
Too much wackiness.
Well, not that part, but the financial piece,
Yeah.
like every restaurant in the city of Troy has been hit up, and some of them are doing both, and a lot of these restaurants are really gracious and do stuff for our schools all the time, but it's kind of a lot.
To add to that, they had orchestra gala, Troy High Orchestra Gala on Saturday, and all the same restaurants were hit up for the exact same thing again. So it's like too much for them to do in 2 weeks.
I didn't, sorry, Vinny just was curious about why they were clumped together,
Yeah.
but yeah, it does seem to make sense to provide some separation there, so. Okay, I don't have anything else, I don't think. February 20th. Oh yeah, if you look on the calendar that Judy publishes, it's showing our meeting as next week.
Yeah, I know. She has to change
Because
that.
I asked Rich, I said, I have it on my calendar for the 27th, and he said, yeah, that's right. So
This
if
one.
anyone is wondering. Yeah, he did, but if you pull up like in the communique, if you look at her calendar, she's got the
Well, I think
13th.
you're right, because I looked at it, and I was looking at all the documents, and I usually double check.
Yeah.
for it on the-
Because I put everything in my calendar, and then I looked at her document, and went, wait a minute, that date doesn't match. So anyway, I just wanted to let everybody know, it's not next week, it's after.
So we need to make sure, because there was, I think, a couple other things on that calendar. It still has a board retreat that.
No, she said it's canceled, the board retreat
Okay,
is
I'll
She's
canceled
got
in
one,
the list.
so, yeah.
Yeah,
I
she's
think that
got
was the
it
only one that I
canceled.
saw that
Okay,
didn't
yeah.
accept, but.
I don't look at that calendar if it's not, if I don't get a calendar.
No, once it's in my calendar, I don't, and that's why I happened to notice, like, wait a minute, my calendar's wrong, and then Rich told me, no, your calendar's right. So,
Correct, yeah, because Rich is
Okay.
not there next week, and that's why we usually do this.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, everybody.